Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Harry was dumbfounded. "Luna, how are you here?" he asked. "I made a deal, and you paid the price," Luna said easily. "What price?" Harry asked. "Power, silly. The Queen of the Winter Court made a deal with me for the power of a lifetime. I knew you could handle it, so I made the same deal with the Summer Court," Luna said. "You ended up paying twice, but the balance was maintained." Harry looked at Fawkes. "Do you know what she means?" he asked. Fawkes seemed to shrug, but was dislodged from her shoulder as Harry was suddenly hugging his last living friend from his original reality. "I'm so sorry, Luna. I couldn't stop it." "I know, you did everything you could, but your destiny was never to stop it. It was to fix it after the fact," Luna said. "Now, about the wedding." "Damn," Harry exclaimed. He grabbed Luna and apparated directly back to the front of the aisle. Fawkes followed after, with a bit of humor sent through the familiar link, as he retook his seat on the Ancient One's shoulder. "Take a seat anywhere you want, Luna. The ceremony is just about to start," Harry said urgently, pointing into the crowds of people who were all sitting and waiting. "Okay," Luna said with a happy smile and made a beeline for where she saw the elves. "Is that the Luna Lovegood?" Tony asked. "The one that Hermione always mentions when things don't make sense but still work? From your old reality?" Harry was just nodding as he watched her skip town. The aisle, he had so many questions, to have to wait, was torture. But he'd put it aside for now. He focused his mind using as a little occlumency, and focused on what was most important. "We'll talk about it later," he whispered to Tony. "Fine," Tony said. "But just so you know, the elves are bowing to her, like she's royalty." "Part fee, remember," Harry said. "The elves haven't seen her kind in a long time. I wouldn't be surprised if they treated her like a fairy princess." Further conversation ended as the music selected for the wedding march started and the guests all stood up while the bride was walked down the aisle by Odin himself. She didn't have a father to give her away, but Odin had graciously volunteered. Harry saw her as he always did, one of the most beautiful women he'd ever had the good fortune of meeting, and she was walking to him of all people. He didn't even need to consciously smile for her. It just happened when she looked at him, naturally. He didn't even notice how beautiful her dress was, since it was all of secondary importance to him. She smiled demurely at him, and Odin offered her hand to him as he was told to do. The symbolism lost its meaning, as Harry was now supposed to care for her, like he normally would have anyway. The Ancient One asked for the guests to be seated and talked of commitment, love, and marriage. She asked them a couple of questions and then had them exchange rings. Before she could proclaim them married, Frigga stepped forward and performed a hand fastening and spoke a blessing over the couple, causing them to glow faintly. When she was done, she stepped back and both her and the Ancient One pronounced them husband and wife at the same time. And that was that. With the ceremony completed, they walked back through the aisle and were engulfed by rose petals. The maids of honor and best man all had different duties, like helping people find their tables and handing out glasses of refreshments as they entered the ballroom, which was just there for the occasion. It would be replaced with outdoor decor later, but for now it was to keep the sun at bay and to set the mood with all the magical decorations. Wanda had had great fun looking through spellbooks that were apparently specifically for occasions such as this one. Things like fairy lights that moved from table to table and a spell that would make speeches easier for everyone to hear, or protections to make it so no glasses broke, comfort spells, and atmosphere changing. Spells to give the happy couple a surreal glow about them and a never-ending rain of glitter that disappeared a couple of feet above the tables, never obscuring anyone's vision or landing. The island staff were soon serving drinks and snacks, which were to be served before the speeches would start. Everything was quite moving, and Harry's emotions almost got the better of him when he made his speech, much to the good-natured mocking of all his male friends. The Asgardians had been warned this might happen, so they accepted it in the good humor it was meant. When all the speeches were done and people were seated for the main course, Harry finally had a moment to speak to his wife. "Don't get angry at me for this, but just before the ceremony, Fawkes and I were called to a trans-reality disturbance." "Oh?" Natasha asked with a smile, but Harry could see a glint in her eye. "It seems Luna wanted to attend the wedding and made a deal with something or someone called the Queen of the Winter and Summer Courts to send her here at the cost of some power, which I paid," Harry said. "Fawkes went to fetch her through the same pathway he followed to get here. Or something like that." Fawkes looked at Natasha, and something passed between them. Okay. Natasha shrugged. I trust Fox not to let you get in too much trouble without me. Harry sighed in relief. You really are the best wife a man could ask for, he said as he leaned over to kiss her cheek. Don't forget it, Natasha said with a smile. She was scanning the crowd until she spotted the addition she didn't know. Is that her? The one having a conversation with the table decoration. Harry looked over and nodded. There's probably a Nargle infestation in it, or something. Nargle? Natasha asked. Luna has always seen things nobody else could. I'm thinking it has something to do with her Fey heritage. It caused her to get bullied a lot, though. Harry answered honestly. Well, that won't happen here, Natasha said. Any idea how long she is staying? That actually worries me, Harry said. I get the feeling that coming to this reality is a one-way trip. You mean she left her people to come join you here? Natasha asked, shocked. I'm not sure, but if she needs a place, I intend to give it to her, Harry said. Would you mind if she takes the spare room for a while? Of course, Harry, Natasha said as if it was a stupid question. Did you think I was going to kick her out? No, I didn't, Harry said. It's just that the guest house is already booked to capacity, and I was just worried about adding another person to the house already. As well you should be, Frigga's voice said from close by. She had been approaching them with Odin. My blessings may just be strong enough to overpower your protections from childbearing. Mother, Harry exclaimed. Don't blame her for being who she is, Odin admonished. It's also something we wouldn't mind seeing before we become too old to enjoy it. Natasha smirked at his discomfort. I don't know. I think we could start our family in the next year or two if our other plans work out first, of course. Everyone knew she meant the dark clouds gathering on the horizon of their respective futures. Ragnarok for the Aesir and Thanos for Earth. Of course, Frigga said in understanding. Then she smiled at them again. I'm so happy that you two were finally able to bind your lives properly. Indeed, Odin agreed. It will be good for Frigga to have a daughter to help her keep the men in check. Am I not enough? A voice said from behind them. Hala had approached. Harry was not looking forward to this, but Hala was his sister, and he'd not have left her out of this. Hala, he greeted with a nod. Thank you for accepting the offer and joining us today. My schedule was open, Hala said simply. Then she turned to Frigga. I hear you will be staying a while. It will be good to have someone around that knows how to keep the old man in line. She wasn't friendly per se, but she still remembered the threat when Natasha was hurt. She could respect the amount of dedication the woman had. The fact that she was dedicated to Natasha, someone Hala had grown to appreciate the company of, being a warrior in her own right, made her respect grow, reluctantly. If she was going to be an aunt, she was glad there would be strong female role models all around. At last, the family has finally come together, Loki said, as he and Thor approached too. He bowed to Natasha, Queen Natasha. I gladly welcome you to the family. Stop that, Natasha reprimanded. I'm still just Natasha. Maybe, but now you have a people who would all like to see an heir, and a husband who I'm certain will have fun putting one in you. Thor smiled at her. We're in no hurry, one of the elves called over. They really had phenomenal senses. Everyone laughed, and Hala was surprised that she didn't feel left out of the conversation. In fact, it seemed like the gathered group had formed around her, rather than just Harry and Natasha. Everyone glancing at her when they made jokes and making sure she didn't feel excluded somehow. She couldn't take too much of that, though, and soon returned to her table, where she was seated next to Logan. May Parker was on his other side and laughing at something MJ had said, who was also seated with them, along with Peter, who insisted he be called Pete. The last of the people at their table were Gamora, Nebula, and Peter Quill. Hala had been told all the women at her table were strong in their own right, and even though young Pete's companion was just a mortal, she showed signs of being highly intelligent. Harry had hopes of recruiting her once she was done with her normal education. May Parker had a certain relaxed nature, but turned out to be a motherly sort, who showed actual caring and a friendly, welcoming personality to everyone. She was told that May also ruled the medical department with an iron fist, not even backing down to Harry when he was in her domain. Hala ended up bonding the most with Nebula and Gamora. Both could sympathize with her issues with her father, as they had been raised by the Mad Titan himself. They could also drink almost as well as she could. The Peters also hit it off, even though their pop culture references were a big divide. Pete promised to send him a collection of must-watch movies, and Peter accepted easily. Pete secretly hoped to join him in watching some of the movies just to see his reaction to some of the scarier ones. He'd be horrified to know that Peter had seen worse when the day came. Most of the other guests had already met, and people mingled happily. Mutants, aliens, gods, and other powered individuals mixing with normal humans and highly trained professionals. Yondu stayed well clear of the representatives from the Nova Corps, even though his records had been expunged. The music that they listened to was quiet to begin with, calm and classical, that stayed true only until the king and his new queen opened the dance floor. After that, things started picking up pace. By the time the main course had been served, people started flocking to the dance floor that now played upbeat popular music mixed with other genres, which people could request from the DJ Jarvis. Many toasts were made, but Harry didn't allow himself to get too drunk and constantly cast sobering charms on himself. On one or two occasions, people were handed sobering charm pills. Nobody needed to be reminded to control themselves, as each guest was gifted a gift packet containing some of the pills that Epoi now produced for people in the know. For a very select few, there was the added extra gift of a one-time use ring with Harry's personal pleasure charm on it. Along with the newly created contraceptive charm pill and instructions, of course, he imagined a few people would have fun with those this evening. Among the guests were all the residents of the island, including Eldrin, who Harry refused to allow to work this evening. He was a friend and a guest, after all. That didn't stop Eldrin from making a couple of cocktails for some of the ladies who were flirting outrageously with him. The female elves and nymphs were also drawing quite a bit of attention and were enjoying the company of the other guests. Since Harry had bonded with Zira, the other nymphs no longer needed to get so much attention from him, and they had started spending time with some of the regular guests and the male elves. It was never discussed, but Harry was aware that some of them had started dating and seeing the men that were available to them through regular contact. At this point, all of them had been given lockets that connected to their trees, and they had been allowed on shopping trips and tours of various countries to familiarize themselves with the world they now called home. Fury insisted on supplying them with protective details. Even so, they always returned to their grove. Any men they entertained the company of in an intimate way would do so in the guest house or behind closed doors, to protect the younger nymphs and to avoid the inevitable orgy that tended to happen when nymphs lived in close proximity. Natasha had had a talk with Yera, who in turn had spoken with her grove. They were well aware of the rules that they had to follow in such situations. They couldn't steal men from spouses or girlfriends, and no allure was allowed, outside of the bedroom, of course. Men were also required to supply protection, unless the nymph and a specific partner declared their intent to be bound together. It was not their way, but they understood that it was more to protect the men in that case. Paternity issues could cause problems if provision wasn't made for that kind of relationship, and men needed to understand that their children would be nymphs as well. They'd need to understand that the nymphs would have certain proclivities, and they'd need to accept that fact. One of the elves had taken 2 nymph partners on the island already, and they were deliriously happy together. No pregnancies had occurred yet, but Jera had hoped that her grove would soon start growing. She noticed a couple of the mutant and human guests pairing up with nymphs as well. They were of an acceptable age, so she had no problems with them. She just wanted to make sure that the men knew what they were getting into and weren't just using them. The Council of Earth were represented as well, and now included members from over 50 countries. That number was climbing fast too. Fury had insisted that they attend, since New Atlantis was also part of that council. The Wakandan royalty were shocked at seeing all of the guests, not having realized exactly how varied the allies of New Atlantis were, until seeing it for themselves. They were still accompanied by the royal guard, but they were also invited guests and all seated in advantageous positions. Fury had wanted to supply security, but Harry had refused, stating that there were enough powered people and friends from every branch of Epei. T'Challa was seen talking animatedly with Ororo Monroe, apparently having met her on another occasion. And for those who watched, there was definitely chemistry in the air. Shuri had found Reed Richards and was talking tech, while Sue Richards was chatting with Charles Xavier and Jean Grey. At some point, Ben Grimm spoke quietly to Harry, who smiled and nodded. He cast a spell so Ben could be heard by all, and he took the stage and made a short speech before proposing to his girl. When she said yes, Harry was about to cast some fairy lights on the engaged couple, but Luna beat him to it. He was shocked at first, but then finally remembered that there were now 3 spellcasters on the island. Not many people had realized this, and soon Luna was having discussions with everyone who wanted to know her story. Because she was Harry's friend, she was instantly accepted and welcomed. The elves who had been following her around like Harry had predicted seemed to have decided that she was their responsibility, and Luna was never seen outside their company. Harry suspected that they'd be giving her the tour of the island if he didn't get to it first. He resolved to have that discussion with her this evening still. Harry hadn't had a lot of time to speak to his old friend so far, and Natasha had given him a couple of minutes to catch up a bit. Harry didn't even need to bring the difficult subject up, as she confirmed that it was a one-way trip on her own. Until I make contact with the Fae of this world anyway. They may be capable of offering me similar deals, but my cousin informed me that they lost contact with this reality's courts a while back, and she thinks that they were either blocked or killed. I hate to tell you this, but your cousin was right, Harry said sadly. Apparently the Fae of this world resided on a different planet rather than in another dimension. They were all most likely killed. We haven't seen or heard from them, and we've been looking, he sighed, before continuing. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I don't think you'll be able to get back. Luna just smiled at him. Don't worry, Harry. I was aware that it might be something like that. That's why I only came now. I didn't want to miss your wedding. Harry was shocked, but also kind of suspected it. One day, you and I will have a long conversation about what you see when you look at the world. Luna patted his arm soothingly. You wouldn't understand it if I told you. On the bright side, I seem to be making friends fast. You've made so many nice friends. That's what happens when you abuse Hermione's sign-up sheet magic to make magical contracts that allow me to help the non-magical, Harry said with a grin. You also seem to have gotten quite powerful, Luna agreed, not seeming shocked at all. Then she focused on his hand. Your magic seems to be flowing to that hand. Is it something that happened when you became the Master of Death? Shush, Harry said quickly, completely ignoring the fact that Luna could somehow tell what hand his power ring was on through its Fidelius. I'm not exactly advertising that, he whispered urgently. Luna cocked her head to the side. Why? Aren't you just doing him a favor? I doubt he'd mind if you told people. Harry's head reeled at that. How do you? Then he thought better of it. You know what? Never mind. I don't want to know. Then he had a thought. How's your occlumency? I don't have any training in it, though I suspect I don't need it, Luna said easily. People who try to read my mind tend to get a headache and pass out. Then she giggled. It was funny that one time in potions class, when Professor Snape tried it, he never made eye contact with me again. Harry laughed at that. Man, what I'd give to see that. Can you share the memory? Do you have a Pansiev? Luna countered. I've always wanted to try one, but Daddy said they were too expensive to buy on the Quibbler's budget. Harry smiled and pulled out his personal Pensieve tablet. I brought one here with me, and my friend made me this after he figured out the runes, he said, placing it in front of her. It works just like a normal Pensieve, but has a couple of extra features. Luna nodded and placed her wand against her head, and Harry showed her how to deposit a memory the alternate way as well. She thought it was nifty, but preferred to try it with her wand. It was the experience she had hoped for, after all. She wasn't able to succeed right away, and Harry gave her some instruction until a thin thread of memory finally exited her mind. Harry was aware that occlumency wasn't strictly needed, but useful for making the extraction simpler. Luna entered the memory, and when she came back to herself, she smiled at him and pushed the tablet to him. Harry entered the memory and was happy to see the full memory of Snape making eye contact with Luna, when she was still in first year, he noted, and promptly grabbing his head in apparent pain, before ducking behind his table to not be seen. When Harry came out, he was smiling from ear to ear. That was so much fun to see. Snape wasn't really an enemy at the end, but he deserved what he got from you. Thanks for showing me that. It was the perfect wedding gift. Luna smiled, before saying with a mischievous look, So, should I keep your actual gift for your next wedding, or should I just give it to Natasha? Next wedding? Harry asked. The nymph Zira. Luna nodded. Isn't she your girlfriend as well? She kissed you and Natasha after the ceremony. After all. It's complicated, Harry said. New Atlantis has a lot of my magic running through it. The nymphs are connected to it and through it to me. They needed Zira to bond with me, but now that you mention it, I probably should consider making things official with her too, he finished with a thoughtful look. Maybe, Luna said. It might not be necessary. I just thought you'd end up doing that anyway, she shrugged. So do you want your gift? She asked again. Harry couldn't help himself as he smiled. Of course I want your gift, he exclaimed. Should I call Natasha? He asked. It's not necessary, Luna said as she removed a small pouch from inside her jacket. She handed it to Harry, who opened it and looked inside. What is it? Harry asked, looking at the strange dark dust-like substance which moved in strange undulating patterns. Primal dust, Luna said, also known as prima materia, Harry exclaimed. Where did you find this? I took it from the Winter Court, Luna said. They weren't using it, and I thought it was appropriate as a symbol of new beginnings. Harry, did I just hear? Natasha said as she walked up to him. Yes, Harry said excitedly. He kept his hands steady, though, as he showed her the undulating substance. It moved like it was a cross between dust and water. Luna gave this to us as a wedding gift. Natasha was now excited as well. I can only imagine Bruce's reaction, and Tony's, she exclaimed. Come on, Harry enthused as he made a beeline for where Bruce was chatting with Reed and Shuri. When they arrived, Harry noted Natasha having moved off to fetch Tony. Hi, Harry. What's got you so excited? Bruce asked. Harry didn't answer immediately as he waited for Tony. Once Tony had arrived, following Natasha, Harry opened the drawstrings again and held it out for Bruce and Tony to see. What's that? Tony asked. It looks strange. Is it alive? Luna's wedding present to Natasha and I, Harry said. She called it primal dust, he informed them excitedly. What? Tony and Bruce exclaimed together. Harry shushed them down with a gesture and a smile. I know, right? This will be so useful in our research, Bruce exclaimed, while trying to keep his voice down. Since this is our only sample, we'll need to be very careful with it, okay? Harry asked. Of course, Bruce said solemnly. Still, I look forward to studying it. We'll be working on that together, Tony insisted. This is too big to leave me out of it. We can talk about that after the honeymoon, Harry said. Where are we going? Natasha asked, with a sweet smile. You and I are going to travel to a couple of planets that have intergalactic communities and centers of commerce, Harry said with a smile. Starting on Naindir. I've wanted to go spend time on Axandar. Natasha nodded with a smile. The few reports I've gotten intrigued me. I know, Harry said. The rest of the evening went as could be expected. People inevitably began getting rowdy and fun was had all around. The ballroom was banished in favor of the resort's other attractions. The kids were mostly occupying themselves on the water slide, lit up with a vast array of lights to add to the atmosphere and ensure safety. The tables stayed in place, but now they could appreciate the night sky, which was again lit up with the tiny lights Harry had once used to illuminate the entire island. Loki was taking people for flights over the island on the larger carpet to show them the sight from the outside. Luna was one of his first passengers, and they seemed to be getting along well, which made Harry happy. Luna needed friends, and Loki knew so few people he could converse with about the intricacies of magic. The fact that she didn't treat him like he could snap and attack at any moment helped. Not many people afforded him the opportunity to get to know them, since they all thought of him as a reformed criminal. Luna was already informed by the elves, but she didn't really care, because she trusted Harry's judgment. Harry also noted that once they landed, Luna went straight to Logan. Loki must have informed her of his travels to other worlds to acquire magical animals. After that, she was soon spotted in deep conversation with Lady Sif, who smiled tolerantly and indulged in her incessant need to ask questions about what she knew and what she had seen. He had no doubt she'd be joining them in their future excursions. The party was still in full swing by the time Harry and Natasha left to get some rest. They had been up talking to the hundreds of guests for a long time, and while they were happy, they were also tired, and their night wasn't close to being over either. They said goodnight to the guests and retired to their home to catcalls and whistles that made Harry smile uncomfortably. As they stepped into the house, Harry turned to Natasha and said, "Before we go to bed, there's one more thing I'd like to do." Natasha gave him a sultry smile and asked, "Oh, really? What did you have in mind?" "Nothing like that. Maybe later." He smiled at her. "I was actually thinking that I'd like to introduce you to my parents." Natasha's smile changed to one of understanding, and nodded. Harry closed his eyes and concentrated for a moment. When he opened his eyes again, James and Lily Potter stood before him. "My baby boy, we are so proud of you," Lily said first. "Yes," James enthused with a huge smile. "My son, the King of Atlantis, Prince of the Gods, God of sex and making cool stuff. You have made us so proud." "You were watching?" Harry asked, his voice breaking under the onslaught of emotions. "You saw?" "Of course we were, my darling boy," Lily said. We promised, after all. Then she turned to Natasha. And you, my beautiful daughter-in-law? Thank you for watching after a Harry. We could not wish for a better match for a Harry than you. Definitely, James nodded along. That Weasley girl was nice and all, but she was hardly your equal, Harry. He turned back to Natasha. This one, on the other hand, she's got the right stuff to keep a Potter in line. He smirked at Harry. Moony is going to be so jealous when he finds out you summoned us first. He's been running around every couple of days, just singing your praises and telling people about how awesome you are. So you're all back together again? Harry asked. Kind of, James said, but before he could continue, Lily gave him a stern look. Don't say anything more. You know it is forbidden, she insisted. But I wasn't going to. James tried again, only for Lily to stick a finger in his face. Stop, James, you know where this conversation goes if you continue, she insisted again. It's okay, Dad, Harry said. I also have some things I'm forbidden to talk about otherwise. Harry, Natasha said dangerously, I'm thinking you can drop it too. Yes, dear, Harry said obediently. Bloody rules of tea. James started only for Lily's hand to cover his mouth. I'm afraid your father has never been one to like rules. If we stay here, he'll likely get us both in trouble. She turned to Natasha. It was a genuine pleasure to meet you, Natasha. It was nice to meet you too, Mrs. Potter, Lily said with a smile. Please call me Lily, she turned to Harry. If you will send us back, please. Your father and I need to have a conversation. Okay, Harry said with a soft smile. It was nice to see you again. Hopefully next time I summon you, I'll know what he was trying to say, and there won't be any temptation. Thank you for understanding, dear, Lily said with a soft smile of her own. James wouldn't be sent back without a final word, however, so he removed Lily's hand and said, Next time, let us meet your family. I really want to meet Loki. Lily nodded as well. We must thank Odin and Frigga in person. They've done a lot for you, and we could never thank them enough. I'll make sure to remind him. Natasha promised. They said their goodbyes, which turned into another scolding session from Lily as she needed to stop James again. But Harry suspected he had done it on purpose that time, just to play with her. They vanished with Lily still scolding him, but Harry could see a smile on her face. Then he and Natasha went to bed and Harry rested well that night, knowing his parents were proud of who he had become. The next morning they slept late, and when they exited their house at close to lunchtime, it was to see the party was still going, but with most of the guests having returned by portkey to their homes. There were a couple of cots, which Harry assumed were conjured by Luna or Wanda, with people still sleeping under umbrellas. There was a cheer, and Thor downed his current drink before smiling and walking up to the happily married couple. Good morrow, brother! He turned to Natasha and nodded. Sister-in-law, what brings you two from the marital bed so soon? I would have thought you'd be loath to leave it for many days. It was tempting, Natasha admitted, but we do need to eat, and I have to have more of the wedding cake. It's delicious. We had to stop Volstagg from eating the whole thing. I think he was about to start a fight over it, until Father stepped in and directed him to the chocolate fountain. I'm afraid that the fountain soon ran dry, much to the chagrin of many. Thor replied. Harry chuckled. Remind me to get him one of those, enchanted like the taps. It seems that one was more appreciated than I would have thought. That and the champagne fountain, Thor said. It ran dry the fastest. You'll call some... Really? Harry asked. But it should have lasted the longest. It was magically stocked with hundreds of bottles of champagne. You underestimated the appetite of the Aesir. Odin laughed as he joined the conversation. He and Frigga had gone to rest at a reasonable hour and was up much earlier. We weren't that many, but our prowess was well represented, he said. Harry had invited the Warriors 3 and a couple of acquaintances. One or two of the higher-ranked lords of Vanaheim were also in attendance, and they were all what Harry would call functional alcoholics. The fact that they were used to stronger drink made him put Guardian-grade alcohol on all their tables with orders for the waitstaff to keep it coming should they finish anything, but apparently the champagne was very much enjoyed, and so it was quickly consumed. Harry knew that meant he'd need to think about that for his next magical alcohol after the beer he was planning for Thor's representation to the line. Natasha had gone off to get some of the cake, which Eldrin had apparently spirited away to a stasis closet at the bar. It was a huge cake to provide for the many guests, but apparently it was almost as popular as the champagne as it was almost completely consumed. There was also an enormous amount of leftover food, which was also stored in stasis. Harry planned on giving Volstagg free rein to eat as much of it as he could, Otherwise, it could potentially last for months. Even though it was all completely safe, stored in stasis, and could last as long as needed, indefinitely possibly, it would still become tiring to eat the same thing over and over again. Harry was thinking he could transfigure it into other dishes at least, so it wouldn't go to waste. He was handed a plate of cake and smiled at his wife. "Thank you, Mrs. Potter." "You're welcome, Mr. Potter," Natasha said with a smile and a kiss on his cheek. She would use her maiden name for business and out in the world, but she had decided that she'd like to take Harry's name on the island. "Cake for breakfast," Harry said. "Breakfast of champions. Sumo champions, maybe." Loki joked as he walked to them, accompanied by Luna, who had dragged him to go see the animals that morning. "Your sister is mean," Luna said with a pout, stalling Harry's objection to Loki beating him to the tour. "Why?" Harry asked instead. "She wouldn't let me take Agnar for a flight." Luna complained, "He's a magnificent specimen. If I had a paper, I could write a whole article just about him." Harry smiled at his friend. "Agnar is her mount, and she's very attached to him. I'm surprised she let you near her stare, you art Feistrolls, at all." "She didn't seem to have a problem with me," Luna said. "In general, anyway. That's because you showed her that trick with the food." Loki laughed. He turned to Harry. "Did you know Strauss liked smoked meats?" "I did not," Harry said. "Luna has always been good with the misunderstood creatures." "It's because I spent a lot of time with Hagrid at school," Luna said. "He was going to join me on an expedition to go looking for the crumplehorn Snorkack after Daddy died," she said with a tone of sadness in her voice. "I'm sorry, Luna," Harry said sincerely. "Whatever for?" Luna asked back. "I doubt Daddy blamed you for his death," she said. "We all knew you were doing all you could. What we didn't like was when you stopped visiting us while you were on your crusade to kill Voldemort for good." Natasha put a hand over Harry's mouth when he made to apologize again. "Stop it. She's not angry. You don't need to apologize for everything." "He's still doing that, then?" Luna asked. "Yes," came the communal response from everyone that knew Harry. "Silly Harry," Luna chided. "I knew you were going to fix everything in the end. That's what the Fey courts all believe. They said something about coming into your power first, though." Harry looked up at her quickly. "You know how I'm supposed to fix it?" Luna just shrugged. "I think it's one of those things that can't be explained without getting a headache, so I never paid much attention." Harry deflated in disappointment. "At least there's no prophecy with strange instructions that are open for interpretation in hundreds of ways," he said. "Oh, I'm sure there are, but because you don't know anything about it, you can do whatever you like, and it will likely still fulfill all of them." Luna said, "It's the reason why prophecies are so vague. It highlights one thing with certainty, and then gives you hope that there is a way to fix things. The faith you have in the prophecy then empowers it, making all prophecy self-fulfilling, really." That statement sounded so familiar to him, and it hit Harry hard. "How do you know about these things?" he asked incredulously. "I did finish my new AT-level divination studies under Firenze," Luna said with a smile. "I wish you had centaurs on the island. They always felt so connected to the workings of things. They haven't been seen in hundreds of years. We know there used to be centaurs on Alfheim, but they went missing along with the Fae during the slaughter at the hands of the Dark Elves." Odin said solemnly, "Oh, I'm sure they're just hiding." Luna said with a certainty that made Harry think she knew more than she said. It was not a new feeling. "Another self-fulfilling prophecy?" Frigga asked with a raised brow. "Maybe," Luna said with a smile at Frigga. "I like you. You know how to make things happen." Frigga smiled back at the girl. "I like you too, Luna. Maybe we can discuss your studies into divination at some point." "I'd like that." Luna said with a smile. "Did you know that there are no Raxperts on this island?" she asked. Then, "What are those?" Frigga asked. Luna took her by the arm and walked away, starting an explanation about how Raxpert infestations caused conflicts and that it was the reason people had the inclination to fight when all they had to do was talk about their grievances. It was apparently also a useful way to see invisible things, as Raxperts were drawn to intrigue. "She's a strange one," Loki said as he looked after them. "I like her, though." "Yeah, about that," Harry said. "Luna was picked on a lot during her time at school. I'd like to ask that you spare her your pranks. She might smile and tolerate them, but you'll make her feel like you dislike her." "Of course," Loki said with a nod and a thoughtful look. "Did you ever punish those responsible?" he asked. "She wouldn't ever tell us who did it," Harry denied. She just blamed the Raxperts and smiled that smile. It was this one time I found her walking to school in the middle of the night looking for her stolen items. It was the middle of winter in a castle in Scotland, and she didn't have shoes because they were all taken by the Raxperts. I seriously contemplated murder that night. As would I, Loki said with contempt dripping from his statement, with sounds of enthusiasm from those within earshot. She is your precious friend, Harry. I doubt any on your island would make her feel unwelcome, he promised. What do you suppose she will do, while she acclimates to life on the island and in this reality? Odin asked. I don't know, Harry said honestly, but I suspect I'll set her up with a magazine to publish. The Quibbler was both her job and her favorite pastime. It was considered a tabloid of sorts, but the stories were all based in fact, and when you read around the fantasy, you'd find that she had some real insight about the world. Expanding your business again? Natasha asked. Nah, Harry said. I'll endorse it, but she can run it herself. Who knows? Maybe there's a market for her unique perspective. Let's find out from her what she wants to do, before we decide on the direction of her life, shall we? Loki asked. Who knows? Maybe she'll decide to stay on the island and bask in all the attention the elves are giving her. I doubt it, Harry said. I could be wrong, but she might just think that's how they are. I think so too, Natasha said. She speaks to them like they are all equals, even while they speak to her with utmost respect, bordering on worship. The discussion on what Luna would be doing soon ended when she and Frigga walked out of the woods, followed by a couple of unicorns who stayed behind the tree line, just looking after her. It made a certain sense to Harry. When breakfast lunch was over, they spent the day relaxing with the remainder of the guests. They would leave that evening to Yandar, where they intended to spend a week before going to a place called Sakar, which was supposed to be a hub of activity and trade, though it was also the home to many less than reputable markets. Something about its proximity to a nexus of wormholes caused time to flow differently there, so they could spend a year there and only miss just under 9 minutes on Earth, which was why they decided on it when they found out about it. Harry had wanted to make a large ship for them, with a large interior and all the extras, including training facilities and a lab. But Natasha had insisted that they rent a place and spend the time to get to know the culture there, which was why Rocket had supplied them with a memory and location of a wormhole that would take them to Sakar. They left that evening after ensuring Luna was well taken care of. She was still planning on going on excursions with Logan, but was hitting it off with Wanda as well, who was thrilled at having another source of magical knowledge. Without Harry there to activate the room for tutors for her, Luna had been co-opted to help her with that, and she had asked only to accompany Wanda as she went to different worlds to find magically attuned wood for her wands. Bruce had also started spending time with Luna to take advantage of her knowledge on xenobiology, a subject in which she was almost an expert. All in all, Harry had no doubt that Luna was well cared for and could leave with a clear conscience. They arrived on Yaxandar and was given a tour of the Nova Corps headquarters. Harry was surprised to be informed that he had been given quarters and a rank as a commander for his contributions to their legal system. Memories were not easy to fake, and willingly submitting memories could clear a wrongfully accused of any wrongdoing as well as assist in tracking the real perpetrators. Comparing multiple memories was considered to be foolproof when available. The quarters were not large, but they were comfortable and they had free access to transport while they were touring the planet and seeing the sights. Harry had arranged some credits, the commonly used currency, and been shown how the system worked so they had money to spend and could shop for souvenirs and technology as they went. The amount of credits he had made it so he could buy basically anything. When the first week was up, they decided to go home to check on things before their trip to Sakar. Harry quickly got an update and had to open the vault for a delivery from Coulson. Apparently they had had the Darkhold and lost it to an enemy. When it was recovered, they had used it through an artificially intelligent life model decoy, LMD, called ADA, a new development from one of their contacts to help rescue Phil Coulson and Leo Fitz, who had apparently been stuck between dimensions after their quarry at the time used a machine to turn himself into an enhanced with the power to create matter from nothing. The enhanced had been dealt with, but the LDM idea had been found by S.H.I.E.L.D. staff, who were on strict orders to monitor her due to her contact with the Darkhold, trying to print herself a biological body using the process they had used to make Vision. She had been given the option to sign a contract and refused, so she had been sent into a time-dilated cell to keep her in stasis until they could figure out a way to safely scan her mind without the risk of damaging any of the systems involved. Harry had been shocked that things had gotten so hectic in just a week, but he was told that Coulson's team had been assigned more staff with magical training to help assist in their work. All things considered, they were doing quite well, and had made peaceful contact with many enhanced, some of whom were changed by an unknown alien substance to activate a mutagenic gene, which existed in a small percentage of normal humans, something other than the X gene and apparently alien. Once the book was safely put away, Harry signed some paperwork and received a new device from Tony, which used rune portal links to assist him on their side, which would keep him updated on anything that was happening during his couple of minutes away. Tony considered it necessary since the time dilation on the planet would make it impossible for calls in real time. The only person who would be capable of doing that was Jarvis, so he would be in charge of keeping Harry up to date. The important part, though, was giving Harry access to their systems, should he need it. He can also upload new data to the system so they can use any new information for their database. Tony encouraged Harry to keep a log of what they were doing. That way he could keep track. He fully intended on sitting in front of his computer and reading everything as it was typed. It was only a couple of minutes after all. They left that evening and arrived on Sakaar. What they found was quite a shock to them. The city was divided into sections of the elite, the poor, and the outcasts. While the elite spent their time in luxury and entertained themselves with all-day parties and barbaric matches of combat to the death, the poor strived to earn enough to live on while being forced to attend the gladiator events. The outcasts who lived on the outskirts of the city scrounged for food and would willingly eat people when they became hungry enough. Harry had been fuming when he found out, but Natasha had insisted that they find out everything first. It wasn't their place to dictate the actions of other worlds. They could try and help, but considering the time dilation, they would need to pour an infinite amount of resources at the problem from Earth, and it would still not be enough. Instead, they spent time in learning about the cultures on the planet, and found that because of the time dilation, the city was actually quite advanced. While the poor worked hard, they also lacked for nothing and were being supported by many of the elite. It turns out they were already taking steps to help those less fortunate. The real problem was the starving on the outskirts of the city. They weren't just poor and disenfranchised. Instead, these were the people who had committed crimes, but were not strong enough to be used for the gladiator ring, the usual punishment for lawbreakers. So they were banished and not allowed into the city, except to trade food for things they salvaged. Harry had quickly purchased as many supplies as he could and started a homeless shelter. Natasha didn't mind the effort they put in, as she knew he wouldn't be able to help himself. Building a big enough location and beds for all those who needed a place was simple enough. Harry had to reinforce everything with magic. When it became obvious, these people would simply bulldoze right through the building if it was the shortest path between two locations. He had not been happy to find that out, and by the next time an idiot thought his dormitories looked like a fun target to ram through, they had lost their ship. Harry's next step was to create a transfiguration device, a new one he had never thought to make until the need arose. It would first cleanse anything placed in a receptacle, removing anything that was inedible, and then change the mass of raw material into squares of nutrition bars, which would work as a meal replacement. Clean water took a bit longer, but Harry finally decided to just use the rune cluster to cleanse water in a different device. Setting that up took the better part of a month, and by the end of it, they had trained people in the use of the devices and ensured a ward would protect the production location from evil intent. They were not surprised that the large majority of people who ended up working there were female. They were trying to care for the young who had been born on the bad side of town. The entire dormitory had wards to protect from anyone that wanted to cause trouble as well. This left them with a bit of a hiccup. While they had the production facilities, they didn't have the raw material food they would need to feed the many mouths in that section of town. That led them to the situation they found themselves in early in the next month. You must be the famous philanthropists who have been helping the criminals on the outskirts," the Grand Master said. "That would be us," Harry agreed with a smile. "Idiots," stated the woman standing by his side. She seemed like a grumpy one. "Now, don't go judging people. You don't know, Topaz," the Grand Master said with an indulgent smile. "They might not know how things work here." "Thanks, GM," Harry said as he conjured himself a comfortable chair, and one for Natasha, too. They had discussed things and decided that with all the technology in play on this planet, Harry shouldn't hold back. "I don't suppose you'd mind if we had a drink while we talk." "I could offer you one too," he said as he produced a bottle from a pocket. It was not missed that it was a big bottle, and it came from his breast pocket, where nothing had seemed to be before. "How are you doing that?" The Grandmaster asked, ignoring Harry's purposefully casual use of his name. Magic, Harry said with an easy smile. Though I'd appreciate it if that stays between us. Don't want the world to know now, do we? He poured 3 drinks in conjured glasses and floated one over to the Grandmaster, who took it, but he didn't drink, until Harry said, "Cheers," and downed his glass before pouring another one. Natasha took a sip of hers and blew a gout of flame before swallowing. She said, theatrically. I love it when you bring out the good alcohol. Nothing but the best for you, honey, Harry said with a smile. The Grandmaster looked between them suspiciously before he sniffed at the drink and having the smallest of sips. He cringed at the burning sensation, but then smiled as the calm hit him. Oh, this is good. He sat back with a contented smile before addressing the pair in front of him. You'll have to get me some of this. I'll consider it, depending on how things go here. Harry said easily, Our main purpose is to talk to you about the outcasts you have here on Sakadar. Scum, came the unwarranted commentary from Topaz. The Grandmaster just smiled. And what would you like to discuss? He asked. I don't know if you are aware, but not all who live on the outskirts are criminals, Harry started. Some people have families and people are dying of starvation. We'd like to secure food for those in need. All you'd need to do is declare that leftovers, or at least uneaten food, even spoiled, be taken to the dormitory in the part of town I purchased. Why would we do that? The Grandmaster asked. People are banished to the outskirts because they perform a vital function. Worms, Topaz said. You're saying they are just part of the cycle here on Sake? Harry asked. He wasn't happy about it, but he understood he had no right to make demands here, unless he wanted to take over. From what he had been hearing, though, the Grandmaster ruled with a bit of charisma, a lot of fear, and an overuse of manpower. He also knew that the Grandmaster had a love of partying and indulging in his pastimes. They scavenge through the things that fall from the wormholes and bring what they find to those who can reuse them in exchange for necessities, the Grandmaster said. We already support those from the lower income districts with what we can. That's not enough, though, Harry said. We've set up some devices that make plant matter and meat, which was spoiling into something edible. What we need is the raw materials so that those we've left in charge can produce sustenance for those in need. There are innocent children suffering out there, and I don't like children suffering. Harry has a soft spot for helping children, Natasha said. Eat them, Topaz said. The Grandmaster turned around and looked incredulously at the woman. Topaz, what is it with you today? He asked. The woman shrugged and said, Protein. The Grandmaster laughed at that, but responded, We won't be doing that. Seriously, you're so bad today. He admonished still with a smile. Then he turned back to his guests, having missed the flash of Harry's eyes, and when Natasha took his hand to help him control his emotions. Is there anything else we can do for you? This time he was not smiling. He did not appreciate people coming to his world and telling him how to run things. That only lasted until he took another sip of the drink and smiled again. This really is good, he noted. Thank you, Grandmaster, Natasha answered for Harry, who was still fuming at Topaz. But if you can't see your way to helping these people, we'll have to come up with something else. She looked at her husband and said, Come on, Harry. I don't think the Grandmaster wants to deal. Harry nodded and stood up. The Grandmaster did not like where this was going. He needed to secure some of this wonderful drink. I didn't say we couldn't come to an arrangement, he said with a winning smile. I just need to think of a good enough reason to make a change. Perhaps a wager? He asked. What do you have in mind? Harry asked. Have you ever been to the fights? The Grandmaster asked. From there, it was an easy thing to arrange. The Grandmaster needed them to put someone in a fight, and they would bet a large supply of fire whiskey against support for the dormitories. Harry had quickly disappeared, grabbed Bruce, and reappeared on the planet where Natasha was, using her ring as his guide. Natasha was at the dormitories again, helping arrange scouting parties and scavengers to go look for food in places where it would be easier to obtain. She had turned a blind eye when some of the meat they brought in for processing was clearly an arm from some sort of alien humanoid. It had scales and 4 fingers, but it looked far too human for Natasha to want to think about. Bruce had been standing next to Tony, reading Harry's logs, when he arrived and disappeared again. He knew about the time dilation and knew he could spare a couple of moments in real time. Hulk had jumped at the opportunity and soon Harry had arranged a fight for him. The Grandmaster had laughed when Harry told him Hulk would be able to fight every single one of their fighters, and had upped the stakes to double the support for one shipment of fire whiskey and another shipment of Tempest rum. After tasting that one, the Grandmaster had instantly agreed. Harry thought he liked that one even better. He was proud of his own creation. Needless to say, Hulk easily defeated all comers in single combat. Even when the stakes were up to multiple opponents, Hulk simply laughed and continued winning. When Tupaz tried to hit both Harry and Natasha with some sort of device to try and disable them, they just dropped to the floor, sparking. Harry had known to expect something. Dictatorships weren't built on kept promises and trust. He just turned to the Grand Master and winked. "I think we'll be sticking around to make sure the dormitories get what you promised." The Grand Master scowled, but sighed in defeat. All right, he grumped. "How much would it cost me to buy more of those?" he asked, indicating the bottles Harry had brought for the occasion. "We can discuss it," Harry said with a deceptively calm smile. "You could attack him and he could forgive you, but Natasha was off limits. I'm thinking we'll be signing a magically binding contract now, though." 1 year after they left, about 8 minutes and 40 seconds Earth time, Harry had finally had a month of vacation time with Natasha. He had completely reformed the places where the debris landed through the wormholes. What fell through the portals were magically separated and sorted into metal, stone, and whatever else came through. Edible substances appeared in a small warehouse and was used by very well-trained staff. Living creatures went to another place with strict orders not to eat intelligent beings. The debris was then carted to a production facility where raw materials could be fed into a similar device as the food processing devices. It formed the different materials into usable shapes. Bricks for building, metal plates, cups and dishes, cutlery, milk bottles, tools, and much more. Those were to be distributed fairly and sold off to purchase more supplies for the dormitories. Harry had worked one final deal with the Grandmaster to arrange for the release of the gladiators as well. They were freed into his custody, and they worked for him directly while he arranged things. Harry left a couple of items to empower those who fought, making the fights more entertaining. The deal was to only put the worst criminals in the arena. Even if the competitors weren't strong, the items would make the fights more entertaining as they emulated the powers of enhanced people he knew, without being able to attack the crowd and losing their powers outside of the stadium. It would also protect them from fatal injuries, ensuring that they could pay for their crimes until they were no longer capable of fighting. What crimes warranted such punishments and how long they would need to compete were also agreed upon. The part that made the Grandmaster agree to the deal was that any precious metals, gems, and valuables were removed when they came through the wormholes and sent to a warehouse-sized cupboard in the Grandmaster's personal dwelling. Harry had had to pull up the schematics for the PMMG as well, and had built one to accumulate and power the systems he had set up, as the enchantments would lose power otherwise. An excess magic would be sent to his power ring's battery. When full, it would simply stop until it was needed by the enchantments or his battery again. When they left Sakar, it was with a couple of hugs to the friends they had made, knowing that in one day for them 166 years would have passed on Sakar. It was mind-boggling to think how old the Grandmaster must be if he was considered millions of years old off of Sakar, considering that Harry and he never really saw eye to eye, but Harry had at least successfully breached the divide between the outcasts and the starving and helped them succeed so that there were only two groups left, the rich and powerful and what would pass for middle class in a third world country on Earth. Those most affected hailed him as the savior of Sakar, and there was a grand feast in his honor the day before they left. Harry's final gift to them was a new range of transfiguration devices, which would turn the nutrition cubes into more appetizing dishes. That had made the occasion a grand success, and people were begging him to stay, but he had a life to go back to. He told them he would come and visit again in a couple of thousand years, if his schedule permitted it. And that was that. Harry and Natasha had returned to Earth, with a few new friends to add to the ranks of Ep17, and a whole bunch of tech for the R&D division. It had only been a couple of minutes for them, and future trips to Sakar was being planned already. Apparently Fury had also been reading his logs. As for Harry and Natasha, they needed a break from people and decided to spend a week in blissful solitude in their house on New Atlantis. It was one day into the happy couple's last week of holiday, when things started going wrong. Harry's mirror was vibrating, but he didn't want to answer. After Sakar, he was still emotionally exhausted. His magic was brimming. He had slept well. but he wasn't in the mood for people. People sucked. Harry, Natasha admonished when she noticed him ignoring the mirror. It could be an emergency. Okay, fine. Harry sighed and picked the mirror up. He answered the call and said, yes, in as polite a voice as he could. Commander Potter, came the familiar voice of Nova Prime. But in what seemed like a blind panic, we have an emergency. Thanos has come. Harry was up in an instant. The image through the mirror was not good. The roof was falling in several places and fires were burning. The sound of screaming was heard in the background. What's happening? He asked urgently. Instantly dressed in his armor and ready to go. One of his ships just appeared above us and started firing on the Nova Corps headquarters, she said. Can you send support? I'll have Midnight there as soon as I can. Harry promised. Protect the people, forget the headquarters. But she started. Not buts. Harry yelled at her. A building can be rebuilt. People can't be fixed once they are dead. Nova Prime looked at him for only a moment before nodding and disconnected. Natasha was already next to him, and holding his shoulder, he apparated them away to the Bridge of Midnight. Director Brand, he said gratefully, when he saw the woman sitting at her post on the bridge. One of our allies are in need of our assistance. Yangzidar is being attacked by Thanos' people right now. We need you in orbit to shoot the bastard out of the sky. Brand was instantly off her seat. We'll be there in 5 minutes, she said instantly. Get the magic core there now and deliver what support you can. Then she turned to the side and pressed a button. Instantly lights started flashing and sirens started blaring. She pressed another button and spoke into a receiver. Midnight is mobilizing. I repeat, Midnight is mobilizing. This is not a drill, people. I need everyone at their stations, and portal control setting a portal above Yandar on the double. Harry did not wait to hear more. He was instantly in Ippii, where sirens were also blaring and people were running to their posts. What's happening, Potter? Fury asked as he arrived at the command center, where Harry had appeared. Alexander is under attack. Midnight will be there in 5. We need support units there now, Harry said. Fury stepped to his control station and pressed a button much like Brand had. We need all staff at their stations. We're sending support to Xandar. Repeat, Xandar is under attack. Magic Corps and relief squads go to the designated portal rooms and Yaxamdar HQ is their primary target from what we could tell. Natasha interrupted. Correction, secondary portal rooms. Repeat, secondary. We're sending ground support, Fury corrected. You can handle this? Harry asked. Go, Fury said angrily. Harry didn't wait. He activated a port key through one of his rings with intent and also arrived at the secondary portal site. It was the same ring he stored his suit and gear in. He had found he could activate anything he needed that was stored in that pocket dimension through it, so he added a bunch of goodies into it, including all the port keys he could need. The secondary landing spot was on the outskirts of the city, but he could operate from there. When they arrived, it was to the site of a giant circular ship hovering above the Nova Corps building, and it was unleashing a devastating array of weapons fire on the building. Harry didn't know their goal, but doubted it could be good. You know what to do? Harry asked her. Go do your thing. I'll help what people I can, Natasha urged him on. Harry didn't wait. He flew up and went invisible instantly. His aim was for the weapons. As much as he'd like to try and destroy the ship, the falling debris would simply rain on the city, costing many lives. Harry arrived at the first array of weapons and instantly started bombarding the ship with explosive spells. It wasn't working as well as it should, though, as only about half of the damage seemed to stick, so Harry doubled his efforts and started doing some real damage. He was slowly taking out the cannons when something came flying out of the ship. A stream of smaller flying vessels were on the lookout for whatever was causing the damage. Harry didn't let up, but he did apparate to the other side of the ship and started focusing more magic. This worked for him for 2 good shots until the same vessels came around the ship and started firing indiscriminately in his direction. Harry cast a shield and continued his bombardment. His shield took a couple of hits, and that seemed to get more of their attention, and his shield wasn't going to be able to take much more, so he apparated again. He wasn't given the time this time around, as the smaller vessels came rushing around the edge again. He'd go insubstantial, but had found that some energy weapons would still affect him, and he couldn't take the risk. He decided to focus on them then. They were waiting for some indication of where he was, and were flying around the area he had been in last time. Harry started bombarding them then. This worked out much better for him, as the machines were quite small and exploded on impact. Harry spent a good few minutes getting all of them off him before he turned to go back to attacking the ship. He found it strange that it wasn't shooting anymore, but it turns out they were just sent to distract him. He saw a white beam of some sort descend into the hole and then it retracted just as quickly. A moment later, the ship's gigantic wheels started turning faster and it lifted into the sky. Harry fumbled for a moment, but got his earpiece in his ear. "Director Brand, do you copy?" he asked urgently. There was static for a moment, and then Potter were in orbit above the city. "Good," Harry said. "Blow that thing out of the sky. The moment it won't just fall on the city again." "Understood," Brand's voice said back. He could practically hear her vicious smile. Harry flew back down to land next to the building and started healing the wounded he saw. The Magic Corps had arrived with their medical support units. They were treating people where they could as well. The Magic Corps themselves were using their magical capabilities to phase people through walls and to lift rubble off of wounded people. Others still were carrying wounded from what still stood of the ruined building. Harry was still working on one fellow whose leg was broken at the joint when he heard Brand's voice, "Target destroyed." But an escape vessel of some sort was ejected and went through a jump point. "Fuck," Harry swore. "Those bastards took something from the building. They got what they came here for." "We couldn't stop it," Brand defended herself. "The damn thing was on the other side of the wreckage." Harry calmed himself before releasing a frustrated breath and responding, "Sorry about that. I'm just not a big fan of losing so many people for nothing. Please send word to Fury to send some more medical staff and temporary shelters." "Understood," Brand said. "We're returning to base." "Potter out," Harry said, noticing Natasha run up to him as he did so. "Give me a number?" Harry asked. "We're not certain. The Magic Corps are still pulling people from the wreckage." Natasha said, "We've sent many people to the medical stasis storage. They'll be busy for a couple of days. Nova Prime was among them. We don't know how bad the damage was." Harry sighed. "We'll have to speak to someone to find out what was taken." Harry said, "Let me know where I'm needed. The wounded will be sent off. I suggest you help extract survivors." Natasha said softly, "Understood," Harry said and lifted into the air. 4 hours later, and Harry had extracted mostly corpses, but with every 3 corpses, one person had held on long enough to be rescued and sent to stasis to await a doctor. 450 dead was the final tally. Several hundred needed stasis extraction, and just over 200 were healed in the emergency centers sent through with the mobile bunker ships. They were basically enchanted the same way, but with medical staff and much larger space on the inside. Nova Prime had followed his advice and had ordered everyone to evacuate. Just under 1,000 people had escaped the attack relatively unscathed. Apparently, the enemy had focused their attack on the Nova Corps fleet first, and then the command center, before focusing on breaking its way into the vault. When they finally got someone into the vault to look, it was discovered that the Power Stone was taken. This was a devastating loss, as the stone could potentially decimate an entire planet in one attack. They had no doubt that Thanos would not hesitate to use the stone if he thought there was no other way to get to another stone. They returned to EPIHQ to give their debriefing, when Harry's mirror vibrated again. "Yes," Harry answered instantly. "My prince, someone has snuck into the vault and unleashed Surtur," Heimdall reported urgently. "Shit," Harry said, and focused through his ring. "Has Odin activated his bracer?" "Yes, my prince. He is lifeless, and many fear him dead," Heimdall said. There was a flash as the emergency port keys activated. Heimdall could be heard grunting before the mirror was once again on him. "You have activated your failsafe?" he asked. "Everyone is safe. Odin only sleeps. It is called the sleep of living death. Do not fear, as it is keeping him in a form of stasis," Harry said as he grabbed Natasha to apparate them to the safe location he had set up for the Asgardians. He ended the mirror call as his mother was on him almost instantly, having heard Harry's words. "Thank you, Harry. Thank you, my son," she cried as she held him in a strong embrace. "We're not out of the woods yet," Harry said. He walked to Heimdall and whispered something in his ear before returning to his family. "I'm going to need to go to Asgard to confirm its situation." Natasha latched onto him and Harry nodded. "I wasn't planning on going without you." "And me," Thor said, as he also latched onto Harry. Loki said nothing, but grabbed onto him as well. "Mother, please stay with father," Harry said. "We'll be back once we've witnessed it." "Witnessed what?" Frigga asked. "You're not going to fight that creature." "We are not," Harry confirmed. Until Asgard is destroyed, we cannot awaken Odin. It is the only way he can live. The prophecy must come to an end. Frigga had tears in her eyes as she stepped back from them. Be safe? She asked. We'll be in no danger, I promise you, Harry said. He turned to Heimdall. Can you see it? I can, Heimdall said. How? He asked with a hint of something else in his voice. That doesn't matter now, Harry said, as he levitated those that would go with them up. Fox, having sensed Harry's sadness, appeared and landed on his shoulder. Harry nodded at him sadly in thanks for the support, before casting his space bubble spell and activating the portkey he had made for the occasion. It would include the space bubble. They appeared floating in space above Asgard and saw the damage the creature was doing. They watched as it screamed its vengeance on the city. It so loathed and then, with a bellow, drove his great sword into the heart of Asgard. There was a moment's silence before the entire thing exploded. Harry reinforced the bubble with shields as strongly as he could, and after a minute they looked to see only rubble where Asgard had once been. It is done, Thor said with tears in his eyes at the loss. The home of my people is no more. Harry closed his eyes and concentrated, focusing any excess energy he could pull through the ring. Natasha, who knew Harry's plans, spoke up. As Asgard falls and comes to an end, a new beginning awaits you. Asgard may have fallen, but it lives in your heart and your people. But you must not fear, she intoned. For as a phoenix rises from the ashes, so shall Asgard be reborn. As they watched, Harry started to glow brighter and brighter. Then it stopped suddenly. They noticed that some of the debris from the explosion had disappeared. It is done. Harry said simply, Asgard will live once more. What did you do? Loki asked, not understanding. I activated the last of my backup plans. It will be a while yet, but Asgard will live again, Harry said mysteriously. Just then, Harry's mirror vibrated again. Oh God, not again, he said as he answered his mirror. Potter, get your ass back to base. Someone was in the vault. Fury's voice ordered urgently. Fuck, Harry swore. He returned them to base, as instructed, and instantly apparated to the vault, not caring that he had his brothers, Natasha and Fox, still with him. I'm here now, Harry told Fury, through the still active mirror. What am I looking for? The Darkhold, Fury said. We only picked up on the disturbance after the fact, when we did an inventory. I had everyone perform a sweep, and the camera system picked up a flicker. It was like the Darkhold disappeared and reappeared, the next moment. Harry rushed to the location he had placed it 2 days before, on Earth at least, with all the other high-importance items. He stopped when he saw it, still on its rack, but Loki replied, That is an illusion! What fury could be heard over the mirror, as Harry sent a pulse of magic to the item, and it disappeared. We must check if anything else is missing. Natasha insisted. She instantly started moving in the direction of the scepter. Harry nodded and followed, knowing what she was going after, followed by the others. Upon arrival, they found that it too had been replaced with an illusion. They took the scepter as well, Harry said as he sent a wave of magic to dispel any further illusions. Nothing else was taken. I'm thinking they used the Darkhold somehow, as a Trojan horse, and took it with them for its power. Just then, Harry's mirror vibrated. Again. Harry couldn't handle any more at the moment. So many dead Asgard destroyed. The vault infiltrated, and now someone else. Sorry, Fury. I've got a feeling this is more bad news. He hung up the connection and answered apprehensively. Yes, I'm afraid it's as you fear, my prince. Heimdall said. The dwarves of Nidavellir were attacked. Thanos himself is there. Most of them activated their Myrni's portkeys, but Eitri stayed to secure the sword of Gryffindor and was captured. Harry did not answer, as those with him grabbed him quickly, and he disappeared again. They appeared in the conference room they had used to meet with Eitri, and Harry added them all into their invisibility, so that they could rush to their friend's aid and help him. He sent Fox off to the dwarves to keep them calm. They found Eitri kneeling in front of the Mad Titan himself. He was not doing very well. Around them was arrayed most of the Black Order, Thanos' gang of attack dogs. They called themselves the Children of Thanos, but they were just his tools used to conquer. Harry remembered their training sessions where Nebula or Gamora set them up in the Room of Requirement to fight the enemy that they didn't know at the time. As he looked at them, he listed their capabilities to himself. Proxima Midnight. She uses a 3-pronged spear, deadly hand-to-hand specialist. Strong and fast. Cull Obsidian. His hammer can turn into a claw and be fired at a distance with a chain to grapple. strong and tough. Corvus Glaive, he uses a double-sided polearm capable of cutting through anything, supposedly even on an atomic scale. Fast and deadly. Thanos, superhuman strength, speed, stamina, immortality, and invulnerability, supposedly insane but not irrational. Monster. All of their hobbies included genocide. They would not be spared when the opportunity arose. Another figure stepped out of the shadows, her slim figure having been hidden by Thanos' large frame. Amora Enchantress, Manipulator, Sorceress, Sword Fighter, Spellcaster. Harry placed a hand on Thor's shoulder and indicated for him to keep his calm when he saw him notice too. "You have done well, dwarf," Thanos was saying. "With this, I can finally return balance to the universe. It's a pity your fellows weren't here, but it doesn't matter. They will also be called." He was looking at a golden gauntlet on which sat two of what Harry supposed were Infinity Stones. "You will not succeed," Eitri said from between bleeding lips. Yes." Thanos laughed. "Your allies, Asgard. I'm afraid your faith is misplaced. Asgard has been destroyed." He pointed to Amora. One of their own ensured their destruction. Eitri looked up in shock before shaking his head. "No, she doesn't possess the power. She only wishes she does," he spat in her direction. "Yes," Thanos continued, "her perpetual quest for power. She only wants one thing for her efforts, and that is for the power of the sorcerer. Harry Potter, did you know that he is right now fighting for his allies on Xandar?" Just then, hurried footsteps were heard rushing through a far door, luckily on the opposite side from them. Harry recognized him too. Ebony Maw, telekinesis. Genius-level intellect. Herald of Thanos. He approached and kneeled before Thanos. "My lord, I have acquired for you the Stone of Power, as you requested." "Ma," Thanos queried, a look of frustration crossing his face. "You are meant to still be causing havoc on Xandar. Why have you returned?" Ma turned to Amora and sneered. The witch underestimated the power of the sorcerer. His spells struggled for only a moment to break through her protections, and the attack drones only delayed him long enough for me to retrieve the stone. He bowed low again. "I humbly beg your forgiveness. The ship was destroyed by an unknown energy blast when I exited the atmosphere. I only escaped in a pod to ensure that I bring you this," he said as he held a round container of some sort out. As Thanos reached for the container, Harry quickly cast a spell at it, at the same time as he turned Eitri's clothes into a portkey and he disappeared to join the rest of the dwarves at the receiving area on the moon. The container wasn't even touched by his spell as Thanos, somehow knowing the spell was incoming, ripped it from his subordinate's hand and away. "He's here," Amora exclaimed in mad glee as she felt the familiar magic. Thor, Loki, and Natasha had started spreading out so that they could be more useful and give Harry cover if needed. Harry revealed himself to try and keep their attention. If his brothers or wife died, he would never forgive himself. They had practiced these maneuvers, however, and Harry knew that they knew when to activate their emergency port keys as well. They would be focusing on targets that they could disable while Harry tried to do what was before unthinkable. Kill Thanos. They wanted to avoid a war if at all possible. "Hi there," Harry said with a fake smile. "My ears were burning. Were you talking about me?" "So you are the sorcerer?" Thanos asked. "I'm a wizard," Harry said. Big difference. He strolled closer as he noticed Thor take up a position behind the big one, call Obsidian. Natasha was still inching closer to Amora, having decided she would be the better target. Loki was moving towards Corvus Glaive. Harry wished he had thought to bring the other Avengers. "So, what's the deal? Why are you so angry? Do you have daddy issues too?" "You dare!" Ebony Maw the Herald said as he shot up and approached Harry, lifting his hand and summoning the tools of the dwarves and pointing them at Harry. "I should kill you where you stand. You are but a worm standing before God." "Nah," Harry said, vanishing all the tools that the man had summoned, except for a few that apparently had Uro in them. Ma did lose control of those, however, and they fell to the floor. "I've met gods. We party together all the time." Harry pointedly looked at Amora, who had started objecting to Ma's statement that he should kill Harry. "You, on the other hand, you will die when I get my hands on you, for the destruction of Asgard. You didn't even feel me hiding in the skull of Surtur. You do not know everything I can do," she countered with a mad smile as she enjoyed Harry playing with the man, who was now breaking the floor apart to send things at Harry, but Harry simply cast mending magic on the pieces, forcing them back into their original position. "So that's how you did it," Harry nodded. "Clever." After the last repairing spell, he stopped walking. "Thanos, I will give you this one opportunity to surrender," he said, suddenly serious as he cast a killing spell on the telekinetic in front of him. The man was quick to pull more debris into the way of the spell with a smile. He did not know of the concussive after-effects, though, as the spell exploded against his makeshift shield and shrapnel pelted him as he was blown back to land in front of Thanos. As the spell hit, Thor swung his hammer and crushed the skull of the man in front of him, and Loki stabbed the polearm user through the throat. From behind, he didn't even know what hit him before his spine was severed, and he fell to the floor like a rag doll. Loki used the moment before anyone saw him fall to move to a new location. But Thor's hammer was covered in skull fragments and brain matter, and his invisibility unraveled. Natasha had decided to stick with an old favorite. She aimed to hit Imora in the head with both her stun batons. Natasha was shocked to find the woman was an illusion, but she had maintained her own invisibility and quickly moved off. "My children," Thanos said, dangerously. His eyes suddenly on Harry. "I will kill you for that," he promised, pointing a finger at Harry and activating one of the stones on the gauntlet. A beam of pure power rushed towards Harry, and he hurriedly cast a shield. The beam went right through it, destroying it easily, but as it was supposed to hit Harry, it dissipated a few inches from his skin. Thanos let up on the beam of power and turned to Thor to perform the same function. But then he noticed Harry was still standing there, just as shocked as him. "How?" he asked incredulously. Harry didn't waste his time and fired a killing curse at Thanos, who lifted his gauntlet to protect himself, knowing that it would be indestructible. The spell, however, dissipated before it could touch the gauntlet. Harry was shocked, but only for a moment, before he took his scabbard and had Erebane fly at Thanos as well. Thanos parried it with his gauntlet and a lot of force, sending it off to the side. He looked at the supposedly indestructible gauntlet and noticed a gash cut almost all the way through it. "My lord," Ma pleaded, when he saw the look of confusion on his lord's face and the amount of power Harry was bringing to the fight. "The mission is more important. Once you have all the stones, you can rectify this, but we must leave now." Thanos seemed to pull himself together, and as Thor's hammer, Loki's daggers, and Urbane came flying at him again, another stone activated, and he stepped backward, avoiding the hits as he entered a portal. "This isn't over. I am inevitable," Thanos promised before he disappeared along with Ebony Maw and Proxima Midnight. Harry fumed as he summoned his sword back to its scabbard. "Damn it!" he screamed. Natasha was rushing back to him to check him for injury. That blast of power looked deadly. Thor and Loki were not far behind her. The next moment he felt a stab in his side and he looked around to see a smiling Imora. "You're mine," she whispered to him sweetly, as Natasha screamed her anger and concern and the world went black. Natasha POV. Harry's eyes had suddenly gone wide. Before he turned his head and Natasha noticed Imora slipping from the shadows that had magically hidden her. Something was in her hand and it was connected to Harry's back. "No!" she screamed and rushed to get to him, but they both vanished in a burst of green flames. "Harry!" Thor and Loki screamed as they rushed to where Harry had stood. Loki instantly started feeling around with what detection magic he could muster before shaking his head. Natasha had been urgently trying to apparate to Harry's side, but he must have lost consciousness as he needed to be aware to allow it to happen. "No, Harry, come on. Let me come to you," she pleaded, focusing all her mind on the ring, but nothing would happen. Tears started leaking from her eyes, but she refused to accept it as she angrily wiped at her tears and kept trying. "Natasha," Thor said, shaking her. He had been trying to get her attention for a while now. "What?" she snapped at him. "We must leave and report what has happened," Thor urged her. "We must tell our allies. Maybe one of them could help. Perhaps someone on the island has a magic that can trace him." Loki agreed. "If he's in another galaxy, Fury's people will surely send the warship, but they can't help us until they know he was taken." Natasha's face showed her fury, and she wanted to object that she could get to him, but finally nodded. When her brain started functioning and the guilt hit her, she should have been there by his side. Why hadn't she gone back to him when she couldn't hit her target? She was meant to protect him. Thor and Loki exchanged a look and took her shoulders, activating a portkey back to Ep17. When they landed, Fury was already there waiting. He looked them over and noticed Harry was missing, and Natasha's face and the tear streaks down her cheeks. "Motherfucker!" It was the Enchantress. She took Harry once Thanos ran. Loki informed him. Hill, Fury said urgently. On it, sir, Maria Hill said as she turned and put a finger to her ear. Harry Potter has been captured by a hostile. I repeat, Harry Potter has been captured. We need someone down by the A's Guardians. Get Heimdall to look for him. Someone should also contact Doctor Strange. He might have a way of tracking him. I'll go speak to Luna. She knows divination. If nothing else, she may be able to point the way. Loki said as he turned to Natasha, Do you want to accompany me or stay here? Natasha didn't answer, so he looked up at Thor, who looked at Fury. Take her with, Fury said. Luna gave up her whole world to join him here, and she knows something. Get what you can from her. Loki just nodded and grabbed Natasha in a hug before activating his portkey. He was not surprised to see Luna there, waiting. She was smiling at him, but then noticed Natasha in her state. Hi there, Loki. Natasha, have the Raxperts taken Harry again? This always happens. They love him. Natasha looked up suddenly. Raxperts. You said you could use the Raxperts to find things, right? Can you find Harry? She asked hopefully. There aren't any Raxperts on the island, Natasha. I told you that already. Luna said, cocking her head to the side. When Natasha's face fell, she stepped forward and patted her shoulder. You know what Harry is, right? You know he won't die. Natasha looked up at her again, realizing she was right. Death itself had even said so. She nodded and started getting her emotions in check. After a minute, she looked up, now with determination. When he gets back, I'm never letting him leave the island again, she promised. Ooh, you'll have so many babies. Luna rejoiced. Can you help us find him in another way? Loki asked. He had noticed her calming Natasha down and had let her have a moment. You want me to divine for him? Luna asked. She cocked her head to the side again, and thought, I suppose I could try. Can you bring me a map of the country he is in? Loki sagged. I doubt she'd bring him to Midgard, he said in defeat. Knowing that such things would get more difficult the farther something is. What would he tell Frigga? I could have been there, I should have been there. He spat in disgust at himself. Natasha was shaking her head. She was about to correct him when Luna stepped in and hugged him. You're a good brother, she said. I'm sure you did all you could. Loki was shocked at the embrace, but didn't mind as he was still blaming himself for the failure to protect Harry. He cleared his throat and said, Thank you, Luna. Natasha's mind had not returned to worrying. She was now thinking of what she would do to the bitch who stole her husband when she found them, and she would find them. You don't need to worry about him, Luna said. I've always believed in him, and he's still alive and still fixing things. I like to believe the prophecy that says he's going to save many worlds. There's a prophecy that says that, Natasha asked, knowing about Harry's beliefs. Oh, I'm sure there is somewhere, Luna shrugged. Do you want me to go write one down? She asked with a serious look on her face. Loki looked at Luna in wonder. Nothing ever breaks your spirit, does it? Why would I let anything do something like that? Luna scoffed. Of course, I'd like to be useful, rather than sitting on the island. Harry might not need me, but I'd like to help. Luna, I don't think Harry would like you in the middle of all this. Natasha tried. Then he can try to convince me when he gets back. Luna said with another smile, I'll help heal people, if that makes you feel better. Fawkes can even join me. Fawkes? Natasha and Loki both yelled. Of course! He could always find Harry by his magic. He was able to cross barriers between realities. Surely he could find Harry. The bird in question appeared and landed on Natasha's shoulder. Can you take me to Harry? She asked urgently. He was taken by an enemy. Fawkes cocked his head to the side, seemingly searching for something. Then he lifted up off Natasha's shoulder and flew in a circle, twisting his head every which way. A minute later, he landed on her shoulder with a sad note escaping him, as he shook his head. Natasha's sudden hope was crushed. A tear escaped her eye, and Fawkes crooned softly at her, trying to comfort her. Don't worry, Fawkes. She needs him alive, and while I can feel his magic in this ring, I know he's still all right. They were soon back at EPI. Luna had wandered off to the medical wing to see if she could help any of the many victims of the attack on Xandar. She wasn't a meaty witch, but she had a good couple of spells that might help. Nobody thought to ask how she knew people needed healing. Everyone just assumed someone had told her. They had received word back from Doctor Strange. Apparently, he had tried a spell using something Harry had put his magic into to trace his magic, and it had found him, but couldn't make a connection to his location. He suspected there was a ward over wherever he had been taken. He would continue trying and look for another method, but he sounded dubious. In the meanwhile, the only thing they could do was to update their allies and continue with the plans they had in place. Bruce had soon been informed of Odin's state and turned up at the Asgardian barracks, which was just a very large chamber with many rooms around its boundary for people to get some rest. The warriors of Asgard, however, were standing at the ready, refusing to rest while their prince was in peril. When Bruce showed up, he made a beeline to Frigga. "Your Majesty," he said as he arrived, "I have the cure for the draught of living death here," he said, handing her the vial. "Thank you, Dr. Banner," Frigga said with relief as she turned to go to the room in which Odin had been placed. Your Majesty," Bruce stopped her. "Have you ever heard the tale of Sleeping Beauty?" Frigga had no problems mouth-feeding the potion to her husband, so to speak. It was just a short while later that Odin rejoined his people. He was not happy to hear about Harry's predicament. Not happy at all. Both Thor and Loki had apologized to their father for their perceived failure to protect Harry from the Enchantress. "Nonsense," Odin said angrily. "It's not your fault. It's that damned witch. We should have let Natasha kill her when she had the chance. If anything, this is my failure. I should have changed the law. Or let Frigga declare them wed. Everybody could see how devoted they were," he raged, blaming himself, much as everyone else had. "But this does not end here," Odin continued. "When we find her, we will make an example of her." Unbeknownst to him, the warriors of Asgard were paying close attention, and they rallied at his final exclamation. Cheering at his words, Odin turned to them. "Prince Harry has saved us all, and we owe him a debt. When we find that woman and her allies, we will slay them to the last." As Odin rallied the troops, Loki turned to Thor. "Do you think he's forgotten that you're the king?" "Brother, I think you might be right," Thor said, with a small smile. He'd not seen his father so lively in years. "But let's let him have this. He's not leading the army after all. When Harry comes back, I doubt he will allow father in the front lines anyway." As the warriors of Asgard started preparing for war, Wakanda was reeling from the news that King Harry was taken. They too were preparing for war. Many had started considering Harry both a messenger from the gods and some sort of high priest in his own right. He'd always followed and respected their traditions, and there wasn't one tribe, cult, or faction that didn't feel the need to act. When T'Challa called for them, they'd be ready. The Guardians of the Galaxy had also been informed and requested a portal to bring them in. Midnight, now portal-capable, was able to use the image through Quill's mirror to open a portal for them to come to Earth. It wasn't what it was designed to do, but Brand didn't really care. It was a capability they had, so she used it. Any allies they could muster would be appreciated. Only Gamora knew where the Soul Stone was, but she suspected Thanos might decide to question her again, so she knew she needed to do one of two things: forget the knowledge or die. The first thing she did when she arrived on Earth was to confess that she had knowledge of the stone's whereabouts, and that she needed a contract to keep it away from Thanos. Fury had no trouble setting her up with one of the contracts and adding the stipulation that that knowledge was protected. They signed the contract, and Fury thanked her for coming forward. "Fuck you, Thanos," he thought. A call had been made to Yondu as well, who made a call of his own, and soon the Ravagers were on board. They were a scattered people, so it would take some time. But they started pulling a hefty fleet together. Thanos' plans were no secret, after all. If he succeeded, all of them would lose either their own lives or someone they cared for. The Nova Corps had also been recalled. They were a very widespread peacekeeping force, after all. Most of their fleet were off-world most of the time. The attack on Nova Corps headquarters had forced them to return and ready for battle. Everyone knew that Thanos had the Space Stone, and it would only be a matter of time before he showed up to collect the rest. The only problem was, nobody knew where the rest were. The sorcerers of Kamar-Taj had not elected to tell the rest of the universe, after all. When Stephen Strange showed up at EPI and requested a contract to have a conversation with Fury as well, he was not pleased. The contract was signed, however, and he confessed that the Time Stone was in the possession of Kamar-Taj, and that it had been for a long time. Finally, it made sense to Fury why Harry had insisted that Thanos would definitely come to Earth. It wasn't just the scepter, which they suspected contained one as well. It was because the Time Stone had been there all along. He had always suspected Harry knew more than he was saying, but he also knew he would have good reasons for not giving the information away. It didn't matter now, though. They needed to protect that stone no matter what, so he told Stephen to bring all the monks to API, where they were at least protected by Fidelius. Thanos would need to be able to beat Harry's magic to get to them, which it appears he couldn't. If the report from the fight was accurate and he had watched the memory himself, Thanos was able to cut through a shield easily enough, but he couldn't detect Harry's invisibility. The Fidelius was far more comprehensive than simple invisibility. That left them with the problem that Thanos very well might unleash the Power Stone on the entire planet to flush the remaining stone out. One way or another, there would be a fight. The only positive thing would be that they could choose the field of battle. He called in a strategy meeting and started making plans for what was about to come. Natasha had personally called in all their powered friends and was surprised at the turnout. There were even a few surprise visitors, which she welcomed wholeheartedly. When Thanos came, he would not survive the encounter. Harry's POV. Harry woke up slowly. He had a feeling that something was wrong, but couldn't place his fingers on it. He opened his eyes and saw an unfamiliar ceiling. That wasn't necessarily new. He tended to spend time visiting foreign worlds often enough. There was an empty space on his side, and he suddenly realized he could not feel Natasha next to him. He looked and realized he was tied to something. His arms were manacled to the bed he was lying on. He closed his eyes and focused on reconstructing his last conscious memories. "Have you finally awoken, then?" a voice asked from across the room. Harry now knew what happened and realized he had been knocked out again. Natasha would have his hide for this. "Oh, it's you," he sighed. "You remember me? I'm honored." She laughed in her sultry voice. "But you don't know me, not like you will." "Where are we and how long was I out?" Harry asked. "You are in a specially secured place. Nobody could find you here, even if they knew which world to look on. The Darkhold has many powerful secrets, and for the better part of a day, I'm afraid," she said. "Let me go, Amora," Harry said, trying to focus his magic on releasing him, but something was wrong. He couldn't channel his magic past the manacles, magic suppressing, no doubt. "I think not," Amora said as she walked closer into his line of sight. "You, my dear, are going to give me all of the power you possess, and in return, I'll promise to leave that cow of yours off my list of people to kill slowly." "All the power?" Harry asked. "Are you sure you can handle that?" "I'm a goddess of magic. I have the blood of gods running through my veins. I can handle a lot more than you can fathom," she preened. "You are but a mere mortal. You have great power, yes. But your time is limited, and so I will have to take every drop of power you possess before you die." She walked around and sat next to him, placing a hand on his bare chest. "I could make the experience enjoyable. I hear you were considered a god of pleasure before it was decided that your tinkering was your primary aspect, adopted as you are by Asgard and her people. Asgard, which you destroyed." Harry reminded her after snorting at her suggestion. "The power was never in the land," Amora said. "I knew you had taken steps to save the people. I could sense your power suffusing the people. I could tell you had given one and all a way to escape. Had it not been for that, I may have decided to just take the stone. But Asgard vexed me so they deserve to be punished." "How do you intend to do this anyway?" Harry asked. "You cannot expect me to do it willingly." Amora smiled, that mad smile of hers, and got up. She put one knee next to him and straddled him. "I have many ways to drive a man to do what I want. Surely you don't think I'm called the Enchantress for nothing," she said as she pressed into him, and was surprised to find he was not enjoying her attentions as she had hoped. "Trust me when I say this is the easier option for you. The other method is unsavory, even to my tastes," she said as she pulled a face like she tasted something sour. She then focused her magic on him and attempted to enter his mind. Harry felt the pinprick of an attack and decided on his plan. He allowed her past his first mental shield. He could see her eyes widen at her success, and then she focused, feeling him trying to keep something from her, something tantalizing. The way to enslave him to his own power. Harry allowed her to struggle for a bit, keeping the information he wanted her to find just out of reach. Suddenly she surged her power, and he let her glimpse the idea he wanted to feed her. "A contract, signed in magic?" she asked hungrily. "One that binds you to its words?" "Oh, I like it. You could not even betray me if you wanted. What a marvel you have created." "No," Harry shook his head and ejected her. He took a moment and breathed a little heavier. as she shook the pain of the backlash from her head as well. It's too late, she smiled. I know you have these contracts on you. She reached forward at where she knew his pouch should be, and he allowed her to grasp and see it. Ha! She exclaimed when it appeared in her hand. She lifted it off his neck and opened it. Harry allowed her to remove a contract, and she smiled maliciously at him after inspecting its magic. With this, you will be mine in any way I please, she said with a smile of pure longing, breathing heavily for a moment. That's not how it works, Harry said through gritted teeth. I still have to agree to the bargain. Each of us needs to receive something we want. That's how contracts work. Equal exchange, bitch, he spat at her. Her magic flared for a moment at the insult, but she knew how to make him see reason. If not, with a little effort, she could delve his mind again. His magic being blocked must be weakening him. We have time yet, she said easily. Once Thanos destroys Midgard to flush out the Time Stone, I won't have to worry about anyone coming to rescue you, and in your grief, you will be weakened. Harry knew this was a bluff. She was too greedy to wait. If he played his cards right, he could be out of here in hours, rather than days. A bargain, then, he said, like his hand was being forced. If you allow me to help my people and save them, I will return to you, and give you all the power you can handle, and more, he offered while scowling at her. No, Amora said. You will give me what I want, and Midgard will die. Fine, have it your way, Harry said then, laying back. Knowing Thanos, he'll kill me anyway. When he reaches his goal, we'll both lose. At least I'll be with Natasha again, and you'll be sent to hell. Amora looked shocked and then thought about it. It was true that Thanos did not care for her, and after losing his children, he was angry at Harry. Enough to kill him first, even. Then he'd turn on her, for not protecting his herald's ship like she said she could. Fine, she said. Let's bargain then. I'll let you leave to help your people, but you will give me half of your power first. If you defeat Thanos, you will return to me and give the rest of your power, and your body to me. No deal, Harry said. My body is off limits. It belongs to Natasha. I can live with half my power, though. It should be enough to kill Thanos. When I defeat him, you will wait for my power to fully refill, and I will give you another half. You'll then have your own power and an equal amount of my own. Then I can return home. No, she countered again. I can agree to what you stipulated, but that cow must suffer for humiliating me. I'll take the deal, except you cannot return to her. You will then become my servant, and I will have access to your power until the day you die. She looked at him with finality written in her eyes. This is my final offer. I'll even add that I will not be allowed to harm her, besides keeping you away from her. Harry seethed for a moment and then controlled himself, shaking in anger. She was really making it easy, since he didn't need to act angry after her insult. Then he ground out. You may also not take steps to have her harmed. That is my final offer. Damn! He had seen the opening in that one. Fine, she agreed. I will set up the contract. You can wait there. If it doesn't say exactly what we agreed on, I will not sign it. Harry called after her. You only have the one chance with that contract. She stopped and nodded to him before continuing. She needed to hurry. Though, with Thanos owning the Space Stone, he could already be looking for her. She had no doubt that he'd be able to breach the ward with that blasted stone in his possession. It's how she breached Harry's protections on Midgard. After all, she had also seen how Harry's magic had protected him. Not even the stones could harm him. If she had that power, she'd be invincible. She could even take the stones for herself. She returned 10 minutes later with the contract filled out. She had pored over it to make sure it said exactly what they agreed on. She realized that there was nothing about him not harming her, but if he killed her, he couldn't give her his power, so that would be a breach of contract. She smiled when she realized that the mortal probably thought he had outmaneuvered her. She held it out so that he could read it. Fortunately, she had remembered to write it in English. She wouldn't want him to have an excuse not to sign. Harry pored over the contract and finally nodded. We have a deal, he said. Guttily, she handed him a pen and he signed the contract. Then she signed it. There was a flash and the contract became active. She inspected it one more time to confirm it had done as promised. It was as it was supposed to be. He'd even agreed to be her servant. She walked to the bedside and removed a key from her cleavage, turning so he could see as she did so. Just imagine, if you had agreed to be my plaything, you might have found this, she said victoriously. She proceeded to free his hands, and he sat up. Wow, that's better, he said as he rubbed at his arms. Did you have to make them so tight? He asked, with a bit of a smirk on his face. I had to be sure, she said. Now I'll take that power you promised, she said, waving the rolled-up paper in front of him as she stood back. No foreplay. You just want me to fill you up, Harry asked. He really wanted to destroy this bitch, but he could play a role when necessary, at least for a short while longer. We can discuss that after you've given me half of your power, she said, the glint of madness back in her eyes as he stood up to stand in front of her. Just a moment, please, Harry said as he summoned his armor from where she had stashed it. It flew into the room and Harry quickly donned it. Ah, that's better. I don't like standing around in my underthings. He looked at his hip and noticed his sword was missing. Where's your Rubane? He asked. Your sword is mine now, she said flippantly. I'll not give it back, Harry sighed. Bloodbound, bitch, he said as he lifted his hand and he heard it crash. Then another one. Where did you hide it? He asked incredulously. Finally the sword came flying into the room and into his hand. Emira's eyes were weary as he approached her still with the sword in hand. You cannot attack me, she yelled. She had seen what that sword did to the gauntlet. You're wrong, Harry sighed. I really can, but if I kill you, I'll be in breach of the contract and the penalty clause will activate. Exactly, she exclaimed, victoriously. Harry rolled his eyes. There was no penalty clause. She hadn't added one. Fortunately, this magic was still somewhat foreign to her, so she didn't know that, and pointing it out would work against him here. You have no idea how long I had to sit with lawyers learning about how to phrase things so that I didn't leave loopholes in my contracts. That thing in your hand only protects you so much, but it does guarantee you half my power. If I'm not the one to kill Thanos, for example, I don't have to return to you, so I can just leave the killing blow to someone else. But I'm a man of my word, and I won't shame my family by breaking the contract. Harry smiled, enjoying the build-up to the finale. He'd treasure this memory forever if everything went to plan. Amora was amazed at the stupidity of this man. He had a perfect excuse to torture her, if he wanted, so long as she lived, but he was giving her what she wanted anyway. She walked forward, the madness slipping into her eyes again. Harry put one hand on her shoulder and the other on her chest, above her heart. Are you sure you want to do this? Harry asked a final time. Do it, she insisted. Okay, Harry said dubiously. Then he started feeding her power. Amora stood there with her eyes dilating. Her breathing became heavier, and her chest started to heave. This seemed to give her some sort of sexual pleasure. Harry kept the flow up. He'd not even started pulling on his ring yet. He'd wait until the right time for that. Amora started to pant and moan as she became drunk with power. Perhaps when she had more power than him, she'd ensnare his mind with her power and use him, before allowing him to leave. The contract stated nothing about delaying him or controlling him before letting him go. He'd be powerless to defend himself from her charms after all, as she'd be more powerful than him. She'd break him, and then when he begged her to keep him, she'd send him back, leaving him wanting nothing more but to be her plaything. She smiled at the thought. It was not a pretty smile. She soon reached a point where she expected the man to stop, but the stream was still constant. How much power did this man possess? She'd enjoy using it to do whatever she wanted. Perhaps she'd take over Midgard. Thor so loved that realm, or perhaps she should take Thor next. She'd have the power to compel him no matter how strong he was. The power kept filling her, and the man never stopped, never even looked like he tired. Maybe she'd rather keep him. Once he was under her spell, she could simply destroy the contract. He could sate her lust for power for a long time, depending on how long it takes for him to recover from this. You're so powerful, she moaned, her knees starting to buckle under her. Suddenly she realized there was a chair behind her. She wasn't thinking clearly anymore. It just felt so good. She fell into the chair. Harry, following her with his hands, and her one hand started rubbing a thigh and one slipped up to her breast. She fondled herself, giving the soon-to-be ensnared man a show he would likely never forget. Harry was disgusted with the woman before him. She lusted so much for power that it affected her this much. He started upping the power to finish this bit of unpleasantness quicker. He wasn't enjoying himself anymore. Amora started screaming her ecstasy as the power increased, but he only started funneling everything he had the moment her eyes shot open in realization that it wasn't stopping. I have had enough, Amora said, panting. You may stop. Harry continued pouring it in. I said, you may stop, she insisted, now trying to push his hand away. The contract states I'll give you half my power. So far, I've not given you 1%, he said. Amora's eyes focused on him. realizing he was not lying. "But you can't. This is an attack," she said, now desperately trying to get him off her. But he'd long since activated his enhanced strength. Combined with his Asgardian blessings, she couldn't hope to release herself. "No, this is what you asked for. I'm going to follow the contract exactly and try to give you half," he said triumphantly. He tapped the ring fully and started channeling the power through himself, once his own stores were filled. Amora started screaming, fear now the prominent emotion on her face. "Stop! Please stop!" Amora begged, realizing he was not moving and not releasing her. She tried a last-ditch effort to overpower him and formed a fireball in one hand, intending to hit him in the chest to drive him away. As she brought her hand forward to hit him, the contract, which she had dropped when she started fondling herself, flew into its path and was burned to cinders, as the force pushed Harry back a foot, but she was still in his hands and he just pulled her with him. Her attack had destroyed the contract and he didn't even look singed. Realizing the situation for what it was, she started struggling harder as her instincts began blaring at her to stop the flood. "Stop," she screeched. "Finally, I'm begging you. Please stop." Harry's face held an evil grin. "Or what? What will you do if I don't, you sniveling cow? Or do you want to make a deal for your life? Do you think there is any mercy in me anymore? You are a disgusting power whore, who would stab me in the back for a drop of my power." He spat. Harry's eyes had started glowing with the emotion that was driving his actions now. "Don't you get it? I have the power of many worlds suffusing my power. I gained it through helping them, through effort and time. How long have you lived? Had you shared your power, like I'd, you would have vast oceans of power more than me. But you don't, because you hoarded it for yourself. This is what happens to people who seek only power. They are consumed by it." Harry spat again. "I'll sign a contract. Anything. Please allow me to live. I'll do anything. I'll be your toy, your plaything. You can use me to sire a sea of children. Just let me live," she begged of this man. "No, monster." Harry was conflicted. He didn't care for her offer, but he didn't like doing what he was doing either. He was essentially torturing this woman now. A little voice in his head was telling him that this was enough, that she would now understand to be the man he knew he was. He really wanted to have her greed, 'cause her death. It would be so wonderfully symbolic. In the end, Harry's nature and the voice won out. He stopped the flow, but bound her in place and petrified her body. "I would not soil myself with such a diseased creature," he said in disgust. "Instead, I will bind you into service and ask Hayla if she's interested in being your keeper. She will know how to keep you in line, or simply kill you if you cause problems. Now hold your venomous tongue, or I shall remove it." Amora had just been about to object, but realized that if he could do what he just did, there would be no safe place for her to run to escape his vengeance. She could say nothing after everything she had done. In the depths of her mind, she knew what she had done was wrong. She sat there in silence as he started on her final imprisonment and started weeping. Harry quickly extracted a contract and modified the magic to be a blood-bound contract. He would not trust her to lift a finger, or she might try to escape. He then worded the contract in such a way that she would be in the service of himself or anyone he designated. He did not want her near his brothers or parents. Hayla, however, was not going to stand for any shit. When he was done, he conjured another chair and read her contract to her, forcing her to listen when she only cried harder. When he was done, he made sure she understood and then pricked her finger and let the blood drip on the contract. She could not believe her ears. He had even given her limited freedom. She was to be given food and shelter and everything she could need, but she would be assigned a warden whose instructions she'd have to follow. There was even a clause for destroying the contract and re-evaluating if she was eligible for a form of parole in a time frame to be later decided, pending a full mental check by a trained psychiatrist and/or telepath. After Harry had her signed into the contract and vanished it to storage, she asked through her tears, "Why are you being so lenient?" "Where I'm from, even prisoners have rights," Harry said. "I'm trying to make the world better, not worse." Then he stood up. "Now, how do we get out of this place?" Natasha was feeling something happen through the ring. She had instantly tried Fox again with similar results. She called the Avengers and Loki, and they gathered in Avengers Manor, just in case something happened and Harry needed them. They were all geared up in minutes and standing at the ready. "Something huge must be going on," Natasha was saying. "I can feel Harry channeling a lot of power." "Are you sure you can't take us to him?" Tony asked Fawkes, who was sitting nearby. He just shook his head. Damn, Tony swore. We're implanting Harry with an instant recall port key, or something. I can't stand this. At least you know he's alive and fighting. Fury said through Steve's mirror, where he was also standing at the ready. Something's changed, Natasha said worriedly. He's losing himself again. Fawkes flew onto her shoulder and sent calming feelings towards her. She instantly understood she needed to focus on getting Harry to calm down. He gave her direct access to his magic, his soul. She held her hands and focused her mind on the task, begging Harry to calm down. To be the man he knew he was, it took a minute, but finally she could feel him exerting control again. It worked! Thank you, Fawkes, she cried, tears of pure relief. What's happening? Steve asked. He wasn't as close to Harry as some of the others, but he still considered him one of his best friends. He had blamed himself just as much as the rest that he wasn't there for Harry, but he'd also be having a word with him about calling for them in those situations. I think I helped him calm down and he's in control again, Natasha said. There was a sigh from most of the assembled. All of them had been made aware of his past to different degrees. They had all been shown the memory of the time he rescued Natasha and had almost killed a defenseless man out of pure rage. They continued waiting for 15 more minutes, and then suddenly Harry appeared beside Natasha. She didn't notice his guest as she jumped into his arms, and he held her. I'm so sorry, love, he whispered. No, it wasn't your fault. It was that bitch, she exclaimed as she finally opened her eyes and saw Amora standing behind him with a look of fear on her face. The other Avengers had not missed her appearance, and a vast array of weapons were pointed at her, most of which were from Tony. Why is she still breathing? She asked dangerously. I couldn't kill her, Nat, Harry said. It would be like torturing someone to death. Why not just cut off her head? Sif asked in a tone that stated she'd gladly do so now. I kind of had to trick my way into escaping her, Harry said. She had me almost naked and shackled in magic, suppressing cuffs. Natasha's eyes went flinty. Naked? She asked dangerously. Almost, Harry corrected her. I swear to you, Lady Natasha, my master never once touched me inappropriately, even though I tried to seduce him. Amora admitted bitterly, he is faithful like no man I have met. Master? Loki asked, with a smirk now on his face, suspecting what may have happened. I am bound by contract until my master feels I am capable of being around civilized beings. Amora said. She made it sound like it was her idea. Her pride would take another hit once he got around to actually sending her to Hela. He hoped she'd take her. Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Glad to see you're in one piece. Fury's voice broke in. There are some people who will be really happy to hear you are safe. But before that, I think it's high time we find out what the hell has been going on. And I think we just found our best source of information. With the contract in place, Amora had no choice but to comply with Harry's order to answer questions. That didn't mean Fury would just trust her without Veritaserum. She soon gave them a lot of answers to their unanswered questions. Apparently, she had decided to go looking for allies and found Thanos. She had appealed to him, stating that she could sneak her way into the vault of Asgard. Harry's Fidelius, which Odin had not wanted in the first place, since it would make Harry a bigger target, had made her normal means of infiltration impossible. So it was bypassed through making a deal with Surtar. She had used a ritual to send visions of Ragnarok to Thor. Thor's visions would inevitably either drive him insane or force him to act. Then another one to stash herself away in his skull, where she would be undetectable due to his own soul inhabiting it. Surtur had agreed to the bargain when she swore to complete his transformation, which he would never be able to do without her, considering the new protections. She had waited to a predetermined time when Thanos would be sending his people to strike on multiple fronts. She didn't know where those were, but knew that he had modified his original plans when it became clear Asgard's newest prince had been making allies everywhere he could, empowering them as he did so. It was Ma's plan to strike after Harry's wedding, when they thought there was a higher likelihood that he would be unreachable. Her original plans had included getting a psychic entity known as the Shadow King to silently infiltrate the vault where the scepter was kept, but he had been vanquished, all his accumulated power dispersed, and was now recovering in another dimension. He would not have the power to re-enter their realm for many years, having basically been destroyed and reborn. For that reason, she had set a new trap. She had first liberated the Darkhold from its original protected location and used a spell it gave her to make it so that she could appear by its side no matter where it was. Then she unleashed it on Midgard. knowing its terrible power would warrant being placed in the most protected location on the planet. She had then used the Tesseract once Surtur was being reconstituted to enact that plan. Her final act before meeting with Thanos on Nidavellir was to go pick up the staff and then delivered both to Thanos. Harry had to admit Frigga's warning had been right. Amora was a schemer, and once she had set her mind on something, she'd go to any lengths to achieve it, making her contribution to Thanos immeasurable. It seems it was just pure luck that ensured that the Darkhold made its way to the vault 2 days prior to the event. That, or the Darkhold itself had a hand in it, trying to sow chaos as was its nature. When she had spilled all her plans and submitted memories, Harry left her in the hands of Atiyah until the current situation was resolved. There was no way he'd saddle Haley with the conniving little bitch, while Haley could be more useful on the battlefield. Harry had then taken the time to go to the island to ask her if she would like to join them for the fight that was to come. She had instantly agreed, apparently feeling cooped up, even with her many simulations in her personal room of requirement. There was something missing, like the thrill of battle that could only come from facing unknown enemies with similarly unknown tactics. Harry had then gone to check on the dwarves. They were well taken care of, and he implored with Eitri to keep his people on the moon for the time being. There was a small chance that Thanos might decide to return to have the damage he had done to the gauntlet fixed. Eitri had pleaded for forgiveness for providing him with the gauntlet to begin with, stating that Thanos had used Maud to torture him into doing as commanded. Harry did not blame the dwarf. He was shocked when Eitri then delivered the Sword of Gryffindor back to him from an inside pocket, where he had stored it in a tube that was specifically crafted by himself to keep it safe and to prevent mishaps. Harry had asked why he didn't use it to free himself and to stop his opponents, but Eitri shook his head and stated that he would not risk Harry's treasured artifact by letting the enemy know it even existed. Harry had appreciated the thought, but told him he'd rather his friends be safe. He realized the sword could be used by the enemy and that it would be a devastating weapon in their hands, but he'd still have preferred if Eitri had rather just gotten himself out. But by the time he had the sword, the enchantress had used some form of magic to knock him out and had removed his port key. Harry was contemplating murder again by the end of that conversation. Amora deserved worse than what she had gotten and was responsible for a lot of chaos. He passed the information on and it was added to Amora's already long list of crimes. Eitri did ask for a quick return to Nidavellir under armed guard if necessary. There was something he had to do and it would take him only a couple of hours. Harry promised to send someone along after his next stop. He wasn't happy, but understood that Eitri wanted to contribute in some way. He had finally gone to see the Asgardians, knowing they would be loath to see him leave without a personal guard attachment, and several veteran soldiers to guard his back, despite the fact that Natasha seemed glued to his side since he had returned and Thor and Loki had not left his side either. When he arrived, it was to a tumultuous uproar of cheering. Apparently they had been informed of everything, since Heimdall could now see everything inside of the Ep, where they were currently being cared for. Fury had realized this and had already had him sign a contract as well. Harry was engulfed in a powerful hug by first Frigga and then Odin. "My son, we were so worried for you," Odin had said with relief on his face. "I'm sorry I worried you," Harry said. "I got back to you as soon as I could, but I needed to check on our other allies." "We know," Odin said. "We do not deny you your responsibilities, but we cannot let this happen again. Besides your value to your own people, you are also widely respected and loved." "Don't worry," Natasha said. "I'm not leaving his side ever again, at least until he finds a fail-safe way for me to reach him no matter where he goes," she insisted. Harry sighed, but nodded. He knew what his next project would be. "Fine," he sighed dramatically. "Now what is this surprise Heimdall refuses to tell anyone about?" Frigga asked, jumping into the conversation. "He's been so mysterious since your return, saying you'd have to tell us yourself. I would not vex our prince after all he has done for us," Heimdall said solemnly. "Also, I'm physically incapable of telling you. His secrecy magic wouldn't allow it." Okay, Harry sighed and conjured a very long piece of rope. Very long. He had it spread through the Asgardians and asked them all to grab hold. When everyone was ready, he turned it into a port key and activated it. When they landed, it was to astonished silence. They were standing in the plaza on Asgard. "How?" Thor and Frigga said at the same time. "We saw Asgard destroyed with our own eyes," Thor continued. "Harry," Odin said with a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Isn't this?" he asked. "Yes," Harry said. "I didn't have a choice. I couldn't leave my people destitute." Husband, Frigga asked. Where are we? Odin sighed and grabbed Harry in another one-armed hug. You are the most generous soul I have ever met, my son. I am more proud of you than there are words to describe. Then he turned to his wife and noticed all the eyes of everyone there was on him, also waiting for an answer, so he stepped forward and addressed everyone. A couple of months back, Prince Harry came to me asking for some help, with a surprise he was preparing for his future wife. Since they offered their island to so many who needed a refuge, they no longer had the opportunity to be alone together. A problem I can sympathize with. They do not mind the company, nor do they begrudge anyone that visits them, since they feel such joy in the companionship it offers. What he planned was a new retreat of sorts, a hidden floating island paradise. Prince Harry had needed help with some of the enchantments, since he knew not how to emulate some of the effects we had on Asgard, a place he considers his home. The details aside, it seems that when he heard of the impending doom of Asgard, he sacrificed his latest creation and used some method to reproduce Asgard, here on Midgard. What we stand on is not Asgard, but what he intended as his new Avalon. Odin said to the crowd. Harry nodded. I could not recreate all of the realm eternal, but I was able to recreate the city. Your home should be intact, at least. Missing contents notwithstanding. There was silence as the announcement sank in, and then there was a cheer, which was instantly picked up by all. People were hugging their families, and cheering to the ingenuity of the wizard, their prince, at his latest great feat of artifice. There were tears and laughter, cheering and sobbing as all realized that they had been saved from not just the destruction of Asgard, but given the chance to start again. Some of the royal guard walked forward, carrying the royal carpet and the larger one, which had been a priority when Surtur was first noticed. Harry had told them of the protections those items held, after all, and some of the guards had thought to bring the carpets to the royal family, should Harry's failsafe not work as planned. They stopped in front of Thor and placed the smaller carpet, still big enough for the entire royal family to comfortably sit on, in front of him, and unrolled the bigger one, which the royal guard and some of the more insistent warriors got on. It was their duty to know their land, and they planned on traveling the perimeter to see what their duties would include. Thor laughed and stepped on, indicating his parents, brothers, and sister-in-law to follow. They were soon lifting up, and below them they saw the large city, which before was surrounded by mountains, and further out larger mountain ranges. Now there was simply nothing beyond the boundaries of the outer edges of the city. As they flew around the perimeter, they noticed something which hadn't been there before, on the very edge of an area that had before been the start of a mountain. What's that? Thor asked, noticing the discrepancy. Idon's garden, Harry said. It was transported here when the giant attacked, shortly after the portkeys activated. He pointed to a building that hadn't been there before either. Through there you'll find a few large expanded pocket dimensions, where I've taken the liberty of setting up a couple of fields, which can be used as farmland, and a place to keep livestock. I've also taken the liberty of stocking the pantry in the Citadel and purchasing a vast number of necessities which we'll need to distribute to the people. Things like beds, kitchenware, food, clothing, and so on. I couldn't copy your technology, so we'll have to go through the rubble of the city, which I transported to a secure location. Maybe some of the things there will still be operable. Everyone was staring at Harry. Odin was beaming with pride. Just how powerful are you? Loki finally asked. He couldn't imagine the amount of power required to do what Harry was saying he did. I recently had a bit of an upgrade, Harry said. Soccer now has a PMMG, which is used to help the local people. What extra power it generates goes to my power ring. The time dilation, Natasha said in shock. You get a year's worth of power from the entire city every 9 minutes? Harry nodded. I only realized it after the fact myself, he admitted. I have near limitless power now, he said with a shrug, not really knowing if it was a good thing. The royal family were just gaping at him until Loki scoffed. Leave it to you to accidentally invent limitless power and then be modest about it. All I ever wanted was to be normal, Harry said. I'm not complaining, mind you, but it would be nice to spend a year without fighting for something. Odin was suddenly grinning widely. Thanos will not see what hit him, he enthused. Actually, it seems that the stones can't touch me for some reason, but I also can't attack them. Something about them and myself cancel the other out, Harry said. Unless I'm manipulating Urbane, I suspect it's because it was created in this universe. Odin's smile faded, but only slightly. Then you'll just have to rely on your many allies, he insisted. Asgard will be ready as well when the time comes. Then he turned to Thor. Yes? Did you finally remember that you aren't the king anymore, father? Loki asked with a grin before Thor could answer, but everyone knew the answer. I never forgot. Odin defended himself. I was just rallying the troops. The fact was, for a moment there he had forgotten. He had been king for thousands of years, after all. The trip around the city was completed, and soon Harry was asked to join Frigga as she told Idun the good news, and they went to inspect her gardens. After Idun hugged the stuffing out of Harry, Harry had to place a Fidelius around said garden, since it was now so much closer to the people. When they arrived, Frigga was thrilled to notice her own garden had also been transported, and now bordered on Idun's. Her herbs and spices, flowers and other plants were exactly as she had left them. Thor had ordered a feast to be prepared to celebrate the resurrection of their home, while Harry helped transport the goods he had prepared to the plaza. The royal guard were asked to leave the carpet there for people to transport their necessities to and from their homes. In the meanwhile, the biggest problem people would have was food and clothes at this point. Harry had also procured for them reels of fabric and everything they might need to produce their own clothing. The blacksmith's quarters had been filled with what they would need to produce and repair armor and weaponry, with an added bonus of a rune engraver which would allow them to make their wares indestructible, since the metals on Earth were much softer than what they were used to. Since they were magical beings, they could power the runes themselves. Harry finally had occasion to present Sif with his prototype sword. He had intended to give it to her as a gift for her contribution on New Atlantis and everything else she brought to the team. The sheath was made from dragon hide, some of the last Harry had from his home world, and he had enchanted the handle of the sword to be able to move as his did. It did not have the vibranium core, nor could it grow, but he suspected it would not be a problem for a warrior of her skill and ability. She thanked him graciously and awed at the engraved design on the blade, in the shape of leaves caught in the wind. It was meant to represent her connection with the earth and nature. She had instantly departed to the training grounds to test the weapon for herself, and when she returned just before the feast, her smile was radiant. The blade could cut through almost anything, and she proudly proclaimed its name to be Vindard, as it cut down any in its path and was swift as the wind. When everyone was gathered and ready, Thor stood up and addressed his people. Asgard, we are celebrating today in honor of our savior and my brother, Prince Harry James Potter Odinson, King of New Atlantis. There was a huge cheer from the crowd, and he waited for them to calm, before continuing. Indeed, we owe him much. We also stand on the brink of a conflict, which will see many die if we are not ready, which I believe we are, thanks to him. What he has not told you is that his working was greater than he had first told us. After the destruction of Asgard, he used his immense power to transport what he could to a safe location on one of the neighboring planets of this system, called Mars, in a location he secured with his power, and he plans for a portal to be set up for our people to go find what they can and what can be salvaged. He further informs me that he has set his magic to sort through rubble and crafted items so that they will be separated and ready for us by the time we arrive. I will ask only one thing. Let the warriors of Asgard stand ready for the battle, and let those artisans and workers who do not occupy their time with battle be the hands of Asgard and retrieve that which can be of use. Until then, let us be thankful for what we have, and the effort and sacrifice which bought us our second chance to live on this land, our new Asgard, he cheered. To Prince Harry, defender of the realm. There was a cheer as many jumped to their feet and toasted and yelled their defiance in the face of that dark destiny, which had so thoroughly been thwarted by the actions of the man they all considered the savior of their people. The feast was a joyous event, and Thor had insisted that the other Avengers join them for the first time. The cellars were completely restocked, but nobody drank anything but butterbeer, which there was a tap for now, since everyone was trying to remain ready for the fight which was sure to come. It wasn't mentioned, but the law banning mortals was no longer followed, since it was they who had helped Harry perform the miracle which was the rebirth of Asgard. They had ranged out and placed the magical devices which would copy the structure of the city and imbue its grounds and wares, so that Harry could later transport them to a safe location. The evening ended, and there was no sign yet of an impending attack, but Fury, Hand, Brand, and the leaders of their military divisions had not been idle. They had not had any rest, as they formed strategies based on the known numbers and allies which they had at their disposal. They had no doubt that Thanos would come eventually, but while they still had time, they would plan. Fury had been glued to his faux glass. Apparently Thanos was getting closer, a couple of days away, a week at most, probably preparing and recruiting as he went. The artifact was now a timer for them, allowing them to prepare. After the feast, Harry and Natasha descended to New Atlantis, since New Asgard was floating right above it after greeting Heimdall, who was standing at his post on the non-functional copy of the Bifrost. Harry had plans to set him up with a portal control the next day, which he could use as a replacement. He was just still considering how to achieve this using Heimdall's ability to see all. When they arrived, it was to find Luna, Hela, and Jera sitting at the bar, sipping on drinks and discussing the things they had seen. Across from them were some elves, and around them swam a couple of elves and nymphs. Harry hadn't expected Hela and Luna to get along, but Hela was apparently enjoying her perspective of the world and found it funny, smiling when Luna said something nonsensical. The fact that Luna accepted things so easily and didn't show an ounce of fear towards her must have been quite the change of pace for her. Loki, of all people, had taken the time to explain to Hela that Luna was different and didn't mean offense or disrespect when she called a person by their name instead of their title. Harry was greeted enthusiastically, and many bowed and congratulated him on his victory over the witch, who had taken him. They had all been worried, but knew he would win in the end. Luna's own attitude was an example they loved to follow. Harry would win in the end, and that was all that mattered. "Hey, Luna!" Harry said to her in greeting as Zira rushed to him to hug him. "I hear you've had a busy day," he asked. "Oh, yes," Luna enthused. "The people at your hospital were very happy when I started helping them. Apparently you only gave them the most basic of medical magics. I was able to help them through half of their patients. Did you know that they've been removing the stasis fields before they started healing the people? How silly." Harry was surprised at this. "But they have to," he said. "The stasis magic and healing magic don't work together. From outside the field, maybe." She scoffed. "And once you apply the magic, it works, but only as fast as the field allows. I helped them fix that, don't worry," she said easily. "I would have done more, but I ran out of magic and had to come back here to steal some from your island. I hope you don't mind." "Mikasa is Sukasa," Harry said easily. "I'll set you up with something sometime," Harry said. "Maybe a locket like the nymphs," he thought out loud. "It's not necessary," Luna said as she lifted a locket out of her top. "One of Azira's people already offered me one. They are so friendly. I'd love to visit their grove sometime." Harry realized he was still the secret keeper and that there was a golden apple tree growing rapidly in its center. "I'll have to get permission to give you access," Harry apologized. "There is something in the nymph house that I promised to keep safe." "I understand," Luna said easily. "Speaking of which," Yaxov said with an excited smile, pulling him away from earshot, with Natasha following, "I suspect the tree was affected by our magic, and it's about to give birth to a new life," she whispered urgently, but equally excitedly. "What do you mean?" Harry asked. "I mean, we're about to have another sister," she said with glee and a little bounce. "Really?" Harry asked, amazed. "That's wonderful news," he said, hugging her and spinning her around. "Just wait until Idun finds out. She's going to be so jealous," he laughed. "I'm sure she's going to be perfect." Natasha smiled and hugged Zira too. "You've taken such good care of her tree." "Thank you, Natasha," Jaxila said as she hugged her too and kissed her on the cheek. Then she looked between them and nodded before taking them both by the hands and pulling them towards the houses. "You are tired," she said. "Let's go get some rest." They did not object, but waved a farewell with their free hands and allowed Jira to mother them a little. The next morning they had a quick breakfast at the Avengers' house. Everyone was there, including Thor, since everyone was on high alert. The next thing Harry did was to set up a new port key on a tiny device, which EPI medical staff injected into his body with a large needle. It would keep track of his vitals and could be remotely triggered to bring him from wherever he was, unless there was some sort magic field, which was set up specifically against such things. He insisted that Natasha gets one as well, and she agreed readily. It was in the plans for more of these to be made, but it would have to be voluntary as it was quite the invasion of privacy. Luna had been set up with a permanent port key to the medical center where she went to work healing more aliens from Xandar. Some had been lost, their damage being too severe, but most were saved, and Luna thought she'd be done by the end of the day. She wasn't struggling with her magical reserves either. It wasn't like she could channel the magic directly, but she was receiving enough contact to recharge like one would in a highly magical environment. Next, Harry went to Heimdall and started working on the portal system. He'd had to teach Heimdall the new system, which he didn't have the time to create, so he simply stole it from one of the deep space exploration ships that were ready to ship out, as soon as the current crisis had been averted. It still took him many hours, but by mid-afternoon, it had been set up and tested as working. Then they started working on getting the intent right, so that Heimdall could set his destinations based on what he saw. That took the rest of the afternoon. And by late evening, they had perfected it. They had even tied it into a system so Heimdall could use his sword as the key. Like it used to work. Harry had cockily called the completed device Bifrost 2.0. The news that the Bifrost was up for business again prompted Thor to threaten another feast. But Harry begged off, saying he'd like a quiet evening on the island. When he and Natasha, still not trusting herself to leave him alone, finally descended back to New Atlantis, it was to find Odin and Frigga, with Samantha sleeping on her lap, having come down hours before. They were sitting in comfortable reclining chairs, sipping on drinks and chatting softly as they looked up at Asgard, which floated half a mile above. It was hidden by Fidelius, of course, but all the Asgardians, the Avengers, and certain members of Ippei had been let in on the secret. Harry had originally intended to keep it afloat with the MSC shells, but it turned out that the magical populace now created enough magical power to power it themselves. As a backup feature, Harry had set up a contingency, which stored excess power in case the power generated became too low once the warriors of Asgard started regularly leaving the city on patrol or to defend the other realms. There was a healthy supply of MSD shells already installed as well, which would power a shield much the same as the one they had on Asgard to protect the Citadel, but this one surrounded the entire city. Thor had been given a quick tutorial of how to activate the shield and how to move the city if he ever needed to, as well. It was not difficult. All he needed to do was activate the system from his throne, with intent, which let him see the city exactly as the cannon system in Midnight worked. He'd see himself from his torso up, looking down on a miniaturized view of the city. He could then use his will to activate the shields and movement. He was warned, however, that it would not be able to do so for long. The shields were very power-intensive. Movement, not so much. Harry doubted they'd ever need the shields with the Fidelius, but added it, just in case. Harry walked up to Odin and Frigga, who smiled at his presence and asked him to join them, while Natasha went to go get them some refreshments. "You are faring better, I see," Odin said with a nod. "I was worried for you, my son. You seemed like you were strained after your return." "I noticed it too," Frigga added. "I feared your time with Amora may have broken your spirit," she said, with some concern crossing her face. "I had a difficult time with her," Harry admitted, sitting down on a chair. "I wanted to destroy her so badly by overloading her with the power she craved so much." He shook his head. Should I have killed her or given her the chance from the beginning? She was suffering so much, and her pleas for mercy swayed me. Odin sat up and got to his feet. He walked to Harry's side and placed a hand on his shoulder. "If you were anyone else, even the most noble of warriors, you might have saved her the suffering she so richly deserved and simply ended her existence when the opportunity arose," he said, squeezing Harry's shoulder. "Instead, you showed her the folly of her ways and then offered her redemption. You saw her realizing her fault, forcefully maybe, but realizing it anyway, and then you found it in your heart to offer her the chance to change. Were I in your shoes, I would not have hesitated to end her. I doubt I would have even taken the time to consider her personal desires and flaws. Instead, you showed mercy and saw her potential to change. Your heart is as it always has been, gentle and forgiving." Frigga had joined Odin when she saw where the conversation was heading. One of the nymphs had fortunately shown up to take the sleeping Samantha away. She hugged him then and spoke with conviction. "Had you not created your own kingdom and been so important to your people, I would have given anything to see Asgard become your home. As things stand, I have no doubt that New Atlantis will one day reach higher than Asgard has ever striven for and unite so many people. You may not be able to see the ties that bind people, but I do. In your short time on Midgard, you have gained more connections and followers than I have ever seen, even in Asgard. Even your father, at the height of his power, has never had so many who believed in him as you do at this very moment. Even those of Asgard believe in you more than they follow your eldest brother, though I suggest you never tell him this." Frigga said as she withdrew from him and smiled at him. "The reason for that," Odin continued, "is because you see the best in people. Loki, Hesla, and even I, with my own faults, and knowing my own past and what I have done. You forgave us and saw our potential for good. even when I could not forgive myself, and you worked to fix that which was wrong. When I said I was proud of you, more than words could describe, I was not boasting or exaggerating. I simply could not find the words. You have succeeded in all of your quests, never because of your great strength, but because of your great strength of heart. I wouldn't have given her the chance, a new voice said from off to the side. Haley was standing there, having approached during the conversation. But you are the forgiving sort. I once would have called you weak. But I now see the value in your ways. Had our father been more like you, when I was growing up, I may have not suffered as I had. But it was my choice to become who I did, she said. I only wish you could have been there to share your strength of character with me. Then, forgiveness is not a weakness. It takes more strength to forgive than it does to hate. I don't know if you have made the right decision with Amara. Not many are capable of repenting for their ways. Fewer even are capable of change. I will trust you to know when it is right to offer the chance, since I don't have your strength or experience, but I hope you will have the patience to teach me in time, she said solemnly before turning and walking away just as Natasha turned up with a drink for the both of them. Did I miss something? She asked with a smile, having noticed the conversation and delaying on purpose. She'd bring his mood back once he heard what he needed to hear and experienced the support only a parent could offer. Your husband was doubting his actions, Frigga said as she got up to go retake her seat. This about Amora? Natasha asked. When she received nods, she rolled her eyes. Honestly, she sighed exasperatedly. I knew he'd find a way to make her his bitch the moment I heard she was called the Enchantress. It was never a matter of if, only a matter of when. Odin and Frigga smiled at Natasha as she handed Harry his drink and scooted a chair over to sit next to him. Drink up, hubby. Sierra's waiting for us. She wants to try page 75 again, Natasha said with a smirk. What's this? Frigga asked. I'm sure you've heard of Harry's infamous book, Natasha asked, before Harry could interrupt. At Frigga's nod, Harry covered his face, not wanting to be seen blushing or his mother's reaction, but knowing he couldn't stop this conversation from happening. While the last section of the book is specifically geared towards people in polyamorous relationships, we've been working through that section with Zira for a while now, and I think we've almost mastered the section on temporary magical duplication of sexual organs. Natasha said with a smile. Oh my, Frigga said with a look of excitement. Harry couldn't stand the sound of her interest and got up to go to the bar, Odin following behind him, not wanting to know about the intimate details of his son's relations. When they were gone, Frigga nodded. Well done, you are very good at cheering your husband. It's both my duty and my pleasure, Natasha said. There was a moment of silence, and then Frigga asked, Would you mind telling me anyway? Natasha smiled and started talking. The next day, Harry helped Tony test his new armor. It was entirely made out of nanites, billions of them. It was an idea he had had for a long time, but had only recently had the opportunity to work on. With all the alien technology they possessed, not to mention their own advances and the ability to shrink things, like the microscopic production plant and assembly line they had made, it was finally a reality. The nanites all had an adamantium shell, which was known for extra durability. The insides had IM shielding, which needed to be powered specifically to be switched on, and the whole thing was protected by repair runes, which could reconstruct the entire inner workings of the tiny devices. Tony had even set them up to reside in his bag, with a rune portal to supply power to them all from a remote high-density power supply. He was very excited. They started the testing by first having it stand up to gunfire and then bigger explosions. The armor was still pristine, but Tony noted a few of the nanites had been blown off and lost connection to the power supply, so couldn't return. Then Harry tested his magic on it. The more concussive a blow, the more nanites would lose connection and be blown away. Still, a couple thousand was just a drop in the bucket when compared to the billions still working on the suit. When they were done, Harry had walked forward to the testing location and summoned all the nanites he could. The suit was still IM protected, as it still had power, so it didn't move. Harry returned to Tony with what looked like a bit of dust in his hand and touched it to the armor. Suddenly, all of the nanites were back and working. Suffice it to say, it was a great success, though Tony immediately set to work to change the connections they made, so that they would be harder to break away from the rest of the construct. Not all of the working parts were adamantium, of course, so there was still a weakness in that regard. But when Tony had the connections set up the correct way, he'd be starting work on a magical version of the same suit. They had the technology after all. Why not have a suit made of both? That day, a meeting was called by Fury. Assembled were all the leaders currently on the Council of Earth, the leaders of the various hero groups, the generals of Ippei's army and its different divisions, representatives from Sandar, T'Challa and his generals, Stephen Strange, representing Kamartaj, and Thor, representing Asgard. Fury stood before them and informed them that their plans had been completed. Instead of waiting for Thanos to ready all his troops or allowing time for him to get another Infinity Stone, since Heimdall had already informed them that he'd gotten the Reality Stone as well, they would set an ambush for the Mad Titan. He'd expected, of course, but they didn't want to waste any more time and risk him getting even stronger. The idea was to bring the unnamed person who currently had possession of one of the stones, Strange, to those in the know, which was few, to a designated location and out of hiding and to use its power. The current theory was that the stone would then work like a beacon, as the use of the other stones had been detectable worlds away. When Thanos showed up, they'd wait for him to bring his full force to bear, and then they would set out to stop him once and for all. The actual plan was much more intricate, with maneuvers, tactics, and preliminary strikes, which Harry didn't really always follow. He did note that they were planning on making Thanos regret ever deciding to go on this crusade of his. The amount of powers the people in this room represented was unfathomable, when taking into consideration the few Omega-level powered that were either there or represented. Harry's part was to set up the battlefield on a planet far away from Earth, and then to use him in battle only if it seemed that there was no other choice. While everyone agreed that Thanos needed to be stopped, nobody wanted the confrontation to happen on Earth. While the enemy was engaged, Midnight would attempt to take as much of the enemy air support out as it could from orbit if they had a fleet. That would be easy considering its full capabilities after Brand started abusing the power of the ship. There were one or two surprises being arranged by both Fury and Harry, but there was no doubt in anybody's mind that they would succeed. The battle for the universe would start the next day. The next morning, the monks of Kamartaj started opening sling portals so that all their allies could meet on Earth. The idea was to draw Thanos in first and then to send the troops in from where they were waiting, hopefully catching him off guard. Midnight would be in orbit above the planet. Svartalfheim used portals to fire shots from the BFG and other weapons to decimate anything that tried to flee, hopefully boxing him in and bringing an end to the threat of Thanos once and for all. Since Midnight was now under Fidelius, it would literally be untouchable while it fired on the enemy. Harry had struggled putting the Fidelius on, but it turns out that a Fidelius of this size needed to be stationary, so he'd had to add the ability to switch it off and on. It cost an astronomical amount of power, but an hour later, his battery, which was half drained after the casting, was full again. Soccer was paying off more than he had realized. When the troops were ready and the hidden command structures and mobile bunker ships or flying forts were in place and ready to react to reposition themselves depending on where the enemy landed, the Avengers walked through a portal created by Dr. Stephen Strange. Everyone was there, including Harry, since if he wasn't there, it would be more suspicious. The portal closed and they confirmed that communications were up before they looked at Strange and he nodded. He sat down on the ground and slowly lifted as his amulet started to glow and his head shook erratically in what seemed like fast forward. When he came back to himself, he fell on the ground and breathed hard. "Well," Tony asked from inside his new suit, "what's the verdict?" Stephen got up with a serious look on his face before he nodded. "That's all I needed to know." Tony smirked as his suit covered his face automatically. "Fury?" Harry asked. "Oh, he's coming," Fury said, still looking at the faux glass. Quickly, too. It didn't take long for word to arrive that Thanos was there. Midnight spotted his ship exiting a jump point. The ship was immensely large. Brand judged it as twice as big Ada. Midnight, which was saying something. The ship slowed down once it reached the planet and stopped. "We're picking up immense power buildup. Orbital bombardment imminent," Brand exclaimed. Strange just looked at Harry. Harry shrugged and threw up a powerful shield, backed up by enlarging Robane to maximum size and hovering it above the shield. "Defensive measures taken," Harry replied. Soon it started raining energy weapon blasts all around them, but Harry's shield was not hit once, only protecting from shrapnel at that point. Robane was stationary but still protected all of them. The energy blasts lasted a full 10 minutes. When it was done, there were craters and small fires everywhere around them. but they soon died out as there was no fuel for the fires to consume. The ship is descending from orbit. At current trajectory, it will land north of the staging ground, Brand said. Mobile bunker ships. Move in and take your positions. Fury's voice said. Harry had made it so that only his people could see them. Badges and special tokens allowing only his side to observe the nigh indestructible stationary floating walls, which had since been upgraded with Tony's runes to near immovability. When the bunker ships were in position, they locked those positions in and the crew would wait for enemy contact before making any adjustments and porting out, leaving the obstructions in place. When the giant ship became visible, Harry whistled. One would think such a big guy had proper proportions, but that ship says otherwise. Unless it's full of combatants and they actually need the space, Steve said. I like to think he's compensating too, Tony said. You are still on comms, people. Fury's voice came through their communicators. Harry and Tony decided to drop it, but smiled anyway. The ship soon came to a stop and a beam of white light descended. When it retracted, Thanos stood before them in his battle gear and a large double-bladed sword in hand. Strange, he began. Give me the stone. Strange smiled at Thanos. Come and get it, he said. Thanos tried. Anyway, the universe is out of balance. Every day there are more mouths to feed and less resources to do it with. It's the same on every planet, whether life is intelligent or not. I just want to correct the balance. Strange was about to reply, but Harry interrupted him. Don't try to reason with him, Strange, he said. He's incapable of change, he said, remembering Hela's comment. Thanos had apparently heard him, and frustration crossed his face for a moment before he replied, Is that what your magic tells you? I knew the witch wouldn't be able to hold you. I know your weakness, Harry Potter. You are capable of so much. With the energies you have stolen from the worlds you visited, the only exception is this. He lifted up the gauntlet. Stones cannot be touched by your power, but do you know why? I stole nothing, and do I look like I care? Harry replied, aligning Erubain, still as big as it could be, with Thanos. I don't need to hit you with my power, as long as I can control something from this universe with it. He had realized it as well. The ether had resisted Harry's attempts to remove it from Jane Foster and couldn't be destroyed by his fiend fire in the time loop. Strange had created to defeat Dormammu didn't bind him. That's just it. You aren't from this universe, which is why you are immune to the stones. They can only affect things from this universe from which they were created. But your friends are from this universe, aren't they? He smiled. Do you think you can cut me down before I can kill every last one of them? Do you want to find out? Harry growled and let his power out fully, readying himself for an attack. Ribberdain, even enlarged as it was, swirled around once, almost faster than the eye could see, breaking through the surface of the planet as it spun in a massive upheaval of rock and sand with a sound like an explosion that they all felt in their bones. The tremor even reached Thanos, but he remained impassive. Thanos eyed the blade and sighed as he turned and walked away. Have it your way, he said. Suddenly there was an impact as monoliths fell from the ship and rammed into the ground, staying upright as they opened up and streams of alien combatants exited them. More lights shone down from the ship and even more enemies exited. Ebony Maw and Proxima Midnight appeared next to Thanos when he was on his side, where he apparently intended to lead from behind, and Harry decided to make an example of them. He lifted both hands and they lifted into the air. They had no way to resist. When Harry summoned them to where he and the Avengers stood, Maw tried to impede his own movement with his telekinesis by summoning an earthen barrier, but Harry was too powerful and he was dragged right through it, hurting himself with the impact and leaving him bloody. Proxima tried throwing her spear at Harry, but Steve caught it before it could make contact. When they arrived in front of Harry, Proxima was run through with her own spear and Maw was engulfed in a massive lightning bolt from Thor. Both of them still started to get up slowly, but a flash of green light from Harry later and they were both motionless. Thanos stood there seething as his two strongest and the last of his Black Order were killed with so little effort. He needed to control his rage, for his people to fully engage the army he knew the wizard had assembled. When they were fully engaged, he would use the Space Stone to grab Strange, and then he could go back in time with it and the Space Stone to the last time the Soul Stone was seen and bring it to the present to complete his quest. He had intended on getting the information he was sure Gamora had about the Soul Stone, but had no misgivings about her using whatever method the wizard had given them to secure the knowledge. It was a nuisance, but Thanos would not be denied. He had always known there would be stumbling blocks on the road he was on. When his army was assembled, he smirked at the Avengers, but then portals started opening behind them as more and more people started coming to the aid of the wizard. He had general numbers, but the amount of portals he saw were more than he had bargained on, and the army he saw stepping through the portals was much larger than he had anticipated. The full army of Asgard took him by surprise. They were not seen since the destruction of Asgard, and were supposed to have been destroyed. Their ferocity in battle was one of the reasons he had never gone to face Asgard directly. To have the whole army appear, intact, was not something he had counted on. The army of Wakanda was another thing he had not counted on. He knew of them and had his suspicions, but their numbers were far greater than he had realized. Their vibranium weaponry was something he had known about as well, but with these numbers and the protections the wizard would have provided them with, no doubt made them an equal force to the Asgardians themselves. He knew about the sorcerers of Kamar-Taj, but none of their abilities. They were a very well-kept secret. Every group of the opposing army had some of them mixed in, and Thanos could detect the energies they wielded as each of them manipulated their power to form energy shields, to help protect their portion of the whole. Then more powered individuals appeared. Strange-looking and some with power levels he didn't think boded well for his army. His goal was simple, though. His army would suffer, but he would have the Time Stone, and then everything they did on the battlefield would be for nothing. When he activated the final function of the gauntlet, he had realized they had planned for him in what would likely be the biggest fight he had yet to face. But he couldn't risk the stone vanishing again, since he knew the wizard could hide it on any world, and he doubted he'd be able to force his hand into revealing it with his power to protect knowledge. He even knew about the Midnight, their space warship, capable of doing massive damage with a single blast. He had therefore needed to rely on the Enchantress to retrieve from their vault the scepter he had given Loki to take the Space Stone from them, when it was still on Earth. He had wanted to face them directly, originally, but none of his people could find the battleship to either sabotage it or protect from it. It was an unknown that he would rather leave untested until he had no other option. What he heard from Maz since he'd seen its power left him in no doubt that it would be capable of destroying his ship with little effort. The fact that it could reach Yandar in minutes was just as worrying, and he had half expected an assault when he first arrived. He had no doubt that it was lying in wait for them, should they leave the battlefield intact, so he had decided to make this the final battle before he took the last 2 stones and finished his quest. Harry could see the resolve in Thanos' eyes as he allowed their forces to assemble. No doubt that there were plans to use the distraction of battle to gain an advantage. The Space Stone and the Power Stone were their greatest worries. Stephen had assured Harry that the Time Stone was secure with him, having used his own power to make it so it couldn't be taken even from his corpse. If Thanos expected to lose the battle, there was no doubt he was planning to still win the war, so the first thing he'd try was either the Power Stone to kill the assembled armies and take the Time Stone, or to use the Space Stone to take Stephen and force it from him. Likely using the Power Stone as a threat to make Stephen give it willingly when he realized it was protected. Either way, they had very little choice, and when the fight started, both sides would be employing different methods to try and achieve their objectives. He had a surprise or two up his sleeve as well, but just like Thanos, he needed the fight to start before he could employ those methods. When everyone was assembled, Thanos was the first to raise his weapon and point to the enemy. His army instantly started sprinting to them, and Steve gave the order to attack and led the charge with the other Avengers, while Harry stood back with Loki wielding Gungnir, Odin's spear, and Natasha covering him, while he watched Thanos to know when he planned to strike. The battle was quickly started as the armies rushed at each other. Before the armies could even meet, there were locations in the enemy army where patches of utter darkness erupted, as the Magic Corps used Peruvian darkness powder to hide what they were doing. When the darkness lifted, whole sections of the enemy were revealed to be crushed by the use of gravity. Grenades, and in other locations, many were captured, and being strangled as devil's snares were released from their shrunken containers, in the perfect darkness only to flinch when the perpetual twilight of the dark world shone through. Not enough to kill them, but to make them shy away, dragging the victims along, slowly suffocating them, or until they were killed by the invisible Magic Corps. The Wakandan armies were led by T'Challa himself, with Mapko, suddenly in his giant silverback gorilla form at his side. He had not even waited to be injured, cutting his arm above the band to soak it in his blood. It didn't take long for a giant lion and crocodile to join them. They soon went to attack the giant apes, who fell easily to their superior size, power, and skills. Many ground troops were simply trampled and left for dead. The X-Men and Fantastic Four were also doing what they could. enjoying the feeling of truly letting go of all restraint. Hulk and the Thing were bashing and clobbering, respectively, while Charles made the enemy attack their comrades, and Jane simply snapped necks with her power, tightly controlled, not wanting to endanger their allies by letting the Phoenix out to play. Sue was using her force fields by creating them in the enemy's bodies and expanding them till the poor creatures' chests exploded in a rain of gore. Reed soon found a downed enemy and was trying to hack into one of their communicators to extract what information he could from their ship. Knowledge is power, after all. The Nova Corps and Ravager ships were firing on the enemy and their Leviathans while remaining at a level below where only they could, the invisible bunker ships, were located. Many of the Leviathans met their end when they thought to attack from above and rammed into the magically invisible, immovable, and indestructible vehicles. It allowed the enemy to become aware of their locations when one Leviathan simply lay dead floating in the air on top of one of them. One of their strongest assets, though, was Pietro Maximoff. After initial tests, it turned out that he could take full advantage of Harry's time dilation enchantment, his mutation allowing him to function normally, but with a bit of extra drain on his stamina, turning him even more deadly. He simply disappeared from sight and started to lay into the enemy. Where he went, they simply toppled as he punched them at supersonic speeds. Every now and then a head would explode or an alien would scream for a second as they realized a hole had appeared in their chests. Pietro was brutally efficient, and he didn't even stop to look as he personally dispatched hundreds of enemy soldiers in seconds. Thanos had not expected the amount of carnage he was seeing. He had estimated his army would slowly lose a long battle, but the wizard had taken full advantage of the time he had gotten, and it seemed he'd need to act sooner than he had anticipated. He looked from his quickly dying army and noticed Harry had yet to look away from him. He'd not be able to surprise him. Growling in frustration, he looked to where he saw Wanda, dispatching enemies by banishing their bodies and summoning their heads simultaneously with two wands, one in each hand, decapitating them and making a large pile of heads at her feet. He smirked as he realized she was unprotected and raised his fist. The Power Stone shone and he released a beam of pure power at his enemy. Harry had noticed where Thanos was looking. The moment he lifted his fist, he quickly called into his earpiece, "Wanda, withdraw." Instantly, she activated her emergency port key and was taken away. They all knew Harry's priority, and that when he spoke, it was because he noticed something. Thanos let up on the power he was channeling and realized that his target had somehow evaded him and disappeared. A few moments later, he spotted the same woman walking out of a portal right behind the wizard where he had opened it for her. He was smirking at Thanos. It wouldn't be so simple to distract him, and it seemed he could bring his forces back from wherever they escaped to. He spotted two other people leaving the same portal, but one of them disappeared almost instantly. The other was Hela. He had been informed of her imprisonment on Niflheim. He had not realized she had been released. Harry spoke from the corner of his mouth. "Do you remember your part?" he asked of the man he had made invisible. "Yes," the male voice said back. "You will remember your promise," the voice asked, now from a bit above. "I remember," Harry said, watching the individual enter his field of vision. Even as he kept watching Thanos, "Your people will have what you asked for as long as they follow the rules," he promised. Hela simply walked towards the battle with a vindictive smile on her face, throwing weapons at the enemy as she went, always hitting her mark. Harry had wondered why she wasn't on Agnar, but realized that she cared too much for the Mount to risk him. Wanda needed to get back to work, but she had had to stop to get a new emergency extraction port key, before being ready and calling for Harry to open the portal. Permanent ones took too much power for Harry to supply everyone with such an artifact. After all, the person she had met waiting with Hela for Harry to open a portal was a surprise, and she refused to make eye contact with him. She never liked the man. She did greet Hela as they both lived on the island, and while they didn't get along per se, they had no problems with each other. Harry was on his mirror with fury, hoping to bypass the slightest chance of being overheard by enemies scanning for their transmissions. "Is she almost here yet?" he asked. "We don't have a way of speaking to her, but our sensors are picking her up on the outer edges of our solar system. It should only be a minute," Fury replied. The Nova Corps had sent someone in a new stealth flyer, which was really just enchanted with invisibility, into Kree territory, where Captain Marvel was last seen and had made contact, and she knew to be ready. "Good, my asset is en route, and I've set the location for our care package," Harry said. "Any idea what it is yet?" Fury asked. "You know I hate surprises." "Sorry, he wouldn't tell me." Harry denied. "He told me it would be spectacular, though." "We could do with something spectacular." Fury allowed. Meanwhile, Hela, who had simply walked through the army in a straight line, killing hundreds in her path with conjured weapons and wielding the power granted to her by Harry through New Atlantis, had finally arrived in front of Thanos. They traded blows after a few words, and their fight soon escalated. Thanos was a combatant of utmost skill, and Hela actually lost a few of her conjured blades to his own double-bladed sword, until Rubain, in its normal size, miraculously appeared by her side. Harry had willed the blade to her, and she used it with devastating power. No matter how powerful Thanos' sword was, it could not stand up to the might of the weapon-killing blade, which was Rubain. It took her but a minute to cut down and completely destroy her opponent's weapon. Before she could make an attempt for the gauntlet, Thanos had already realized he was not going to win in a fair fight and hit her with the blast from the gauntlet. She lay still on the battlefield and soon disappeared when her portkey was remotely activated. Thanos then turned back to the battle, which he had been forced to ignore. He saw the men turn beasts raging through his army, while others literally just lost their heads or their chests exploded. That was only some of the casualties, and on many other fronts his forces were being decimated by blasts of energy, fire, and those traps of darkness, leaving chaos and crushed bodies in their wake. He saw one man with claws ferociously ripping into his people, with a smile on his face, while nearby a dragon spewed its molten flame over large groups of his people. His own people had been unable to tame those beasts, so it impressed him even as it caused massive damage. With everyone fully engaged, he thought that this would be the perfect moment to strike, so he lifted his gauntleted fist and opened a portal to where he saw Strange levitating multiple of his men in the air and stepped through. Harry had been watching, and the moment Thanos made his move, he said, "Phase 1. Immediately several things happened. Strange activated the new artifact Harry had gifted him, which would temporarily remove one of his dimensions, namely the physical one, and left him out of phase with the rest of the universe. Harry opened another portal knowing Thanos would be distracted, and Rocket jumped through. Harry opened another portal for him and said, "Wait for phase 3. Yeah, I know." Rocket said as he jumped through the second portal. He needed to set up his little invention, the care package. "See you at the after party," he called behind him. "I'm buying," Harry said, even as he watched the Mad Titan grasp for Strange. When he was unable to touch him, another red stone lit up, and when he reached for Strange again, he caught the Nan and dragged him back through another portal and disappeared to the other side of the battlefield. He wanted to be seen winning. Thanos was now talking to Strange. After failing to just take the amulet from him, his hand seeming to have been burned by the contact. Stephen's spell was still holding, hopefully long enough to make a difference. By the way he was raising the gauntlet, Harry assumed he was now threatening dire consequences. Strange didn't even look scared as he replied. Suddenly Thanos' arm, the one with the gauntlet, lifted into the air, and he looked at it in shock as something else appeared on his arm, slipping from invisibility as its primary functions activated. Just below the gauntlet, a metallic cuff. Itri's addition to the fight, the item he had gone back to craft, it was meant to emulate the inhibiting cuffs Harry had told him about from when he was captured. They knew it wouldn't affect his natural gifts or make the gauntlet any less durable, but it would interfere, at the least, with him channeling the power of the stones correctly, buying them the precious seconds they needed. Thanos was trying to pull back his arm, which lifted him into the air as the gauntlet refused to come back down. Some of his own soldiers were staring at him in disbelief as he struggled against a power he didn't understand. He used his other hand to try and bash the cuff off his arm, when he realized he couldn't focus the power of the stones past it. He knew this was part of their plan, but try as he might, the band stayed in place. Harry summoned Rubain into its scabbard and held it out, where it disappeared almost instantly as he kept his eye on Thanos, which was now screaming for something. The next moment, the cannons on the giant ship became active and started powering up. Before they could fire, however, a barrage of magical attacks filled the sky, all trained on the cannons themselves, destroying them quickly. Harry followed them back to a portal he hadn't been aware of. "What the hell?" Harry yelled. "Didn't think we were doing nothing, did you?" Brand's voice came through the comms. "Brand?" Harry asked incredulously. "We've had a portal open since the ship stopped." Brand sounded smug. "We had the cannons targeted since then. We wanted Thanos to think he has a backup plan for as long as we could. Midnight has a lot of weapons, as you might recall." "Not now," Fury barked. "Phase 1 is almost complete, and you have a visitor ready for a portal." "Hi," a new voice said over the comms. "That's what we've been waiting for," Harry said with a grin. He turned a portal to the director's location, as planned, and out came the form of Captain Marvel. "I hear you need some help," she asked Harry. "It's good to have you here. We need Thanos distracted. Do you think you can manage?" Harry asked with a grin. Right behind her, Rocket walked through the same portal. "I'm back," he said. "Didn't want to get caught, so I finished quickly." He showed Harry a control in his hand. "When you're ready, make sure our people are out, and let me know," he instructed. "Phase 3 is ready. Phase 2, go," Harry said, instead of answering. Thanos had noted the new arrival, and real worry crossed his face for a moment, before there was a flash of power and the inhibiting cuff shattered. But he stayed in the air as an invisible force kept it from falling. It had taken him some time, but he'd finally been able to channel enough power to break free of the restraint, only for whatever power was holding the cuff focused on the gauntlet instead. A wave of energy washed out from him, and the form of Magneto was sent flying at the impact, losing his invisibility as he went. Harry had decided to offer him a part in the fight for his immense power over metal, considering the gauntlet was made of the stuff. He was never the last defense, though, and Captain Marvel was on him the moment he landed, engaging in hand-to-hand with him. "He has to clench his fist to activate the power," Harry said urgently, having watched Thanos enough and knowing what Eitri had told him. "Someone get Eric out." Magneto had landed hard and seemed to be unmoving. When he disappeared after he was encased in the glow of a stasis field, Harry stopped thinking about him. There were other things to concentrate on. He watched as Thanos fought with Captain Marvel. She was immensely strong and seemingly as impervious as Thanos was rumored to be. When she had him on his knees, gauntleted fist in her hand, he made to reach for one of the stones to use its power directly, but suddenly his free arm was lying next to him, having been completely and cleanly cut off. He looked up in surprise at Harry, but Harry smirked and shrugged. Pietro stopped for a moment in front of Thanos, Urbane in hand, and said, "Didn't you see that coming?" before disappearing again. The next moment, Thanos was completely disarmed. Literally, Thanos screamed his frustration. Just as Captain Marvel kicked him in the stomach, sending him flying, Harry sighed a sigh of relief and turned a portal through which Captain Marvel dropped the gauntlet. He then quickly opened his bag and levitated it directly in. His bag would have to do until he could make a permanent arrangement for it in an alternate reality where it would have no power. "Phase 3 people," Harry called. Everyone instantly activated their return port keys except for the flying vessels from Xandar and the Ravagers that had joined them, which turned and went into the sky to get out of the atmosphere. The only people who stayed behind were the Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the enemy army. Those that stayed behind, though, quickly made their way to Harry with help from his portals. Jane was levitating the Mad Titan to them so that he could be tried by the people of Xandar. Harry simply wanted him dead, but he had been told it would make for a stronger impression of their power if the universe knew he was helpless before them. "Fire in the hole!" Rocket enthused as he pressed the button, when everyone was safely behind Harry before anyone could object and set off his trap. There was a couple of seconds in which Harry hurriedly pulled up a shield, just in case, and Rocket looked at the control in his hand before there was a groan from inside the giant ship. In the next second, the entirety of the ship, a good portion of the enemy army, and a large piece of the planet's surface simply vanished as it was sucked into a pinprick floating in the air, which vanished just as quickly. Then there was a cacophonous noise, and they were all ripped from their feet in the same direction as the vacuum that was left, in the wake of the disappearance of the matter that had just been swallowed, filled up with the surrounding air. When they picked themselves up from the boundary of the shield, which had caught them, it was to see the rest of the enemy army had been pulled into the crater left behind, but none of them seemed to be moving. "What the hell was that?" Tony exclaimed as he righted himself and looked around them in case any of the enemy had avoided the final attack. "Micro black hole," Rocket said easily as he got himself up from the ground. He was still grinning like a loon. "Black hole!" Harry exclaimed. "Just a little one." Rocket defended himself. "It was perfectly safe. As long as you remember to keep your distance, I worked it out." "We were safe," he assured them. "That's it," Tony said. "No more runes for you." "But it took care of the rest of the army," Rocket defended himself, with a smile. "What was left of them anyway?" he finished, trailing off as he looked down at the bodies, which Harry had set aflame the moment he got up, to ensure they were all dead. None moved. "Harry?" Charles asked as he got to his feet and looked at the fire that was slowly consuming hundreds of thousands of enemy dead and jumping from body to body as it multiplied. "Are you sure you couldn't have simply done this from the start?" "Not with Thanos in possession of the stones, still. It may have driven him to use the stones to destroy us all if he couldn't have simply negated the effect, Harry said. You have doomed the universe, Thanos said from his position lying on ground. Oh, shut up, Harry said. He was about to hit him with a stunner when he was beaten to it by half his team shooting him multiple times with stunning bullets. Thanks, he said with a shrug. Then he opened a portal and allowed the teams through before he followed with Thanos' unconscious form, which kept on receiving stunners in case he could wake himself somehow, or that's what he thought they kept shooting him for, to the receiving area, where nobody had been told of the success of the mission. Thor couldn't keep the grin off his face, and as soon as Harry, Loki, and Natasha were through and the portal closed, there was an uproar as everyone celebrated their success. Well, Tony asked from inside his new suit, what's the verdict? Stephen got up with a serious look on his face before he nodded. We can leave. Harry's got this, he said. What? Loki and Natasha exclaimed. I'm not leaving his side, Natasha said dangerously. Suit yourself, Stephen said. The enemy will have one thing to use against him. Well done. Clint didn't wait and shot Natasha with a stun arrow while she was incredulously staring at Stephen. When everyone looked at him, he asked what she was being unreasonable. Soon the Avengers had left, with Stephen giving the stone to Harry to keep Thanos there. They bombarded the area again, but Harry blocked as he had in another timeline. When Thanos came down, he found only one man waiting for him. Where are all your friends and allies? Thanos asked suspiciously. I sent them home, Harry said, before he pulled the stone out, showing it to Thanos and dropping it in the pouch again, which disappeared. I can handle you and your entire army on my own, Harry boasted. Thanos didn't notice that Robane had disappeared. When Harry had shown him the stone, a wizard's most useful tool, misdirection. You cannot hope to defeat me, Thanos smiled. I have 4 of the stones already. You mean you had 4 of the stones? Harry corrected. Thanos frowned and lifted his arm to look at the gauntlet and smiled as he turned his hand to show the stones still there. The next moment, his arm was cut cleanly off as Robane flew through the air at supersonic speeds, faster than even Thanos could react, and Harry summoned the limb, which he instantly placed in his pouch. See, you had the stones, Harry continued, before he put a finger to his ear. Brand, I have the stones. You may go ahead and wreck Thanos' day. Understood, came the voice of Director Brand from midnight. You heard the man. Light 'em up, boys. What followed was a bombardment, the likes of which had never been seen. Midnight fired all 3 BFG cannons simultaneously and repeatedly until there was nothing left but scraps. Thanos' body had been disintegrated by a direct shot. By the time the bombardment ended, the face of that portion of the planet looked like it had been hit by every nuke the Earth had, and then some. The fallout would have destroyed any living planet with the nuclear winter that followed from all the dust and ash in the air and would last hundreds, if not thousands of years. When Harry got back to base, he was covered in dust, as he had stayed to watch the show for a while but had to erect shields before long. The assembled armies looked at him like they were expected to march soon. Job's done. Harry informed them happily. Who wants a pint?